The letter arrived on a Tuesday, landing like a grenade in my perfectly ordered life. I almost missed it, buried between bills and junk mail, but my grandmother's lawyer's firm name caught my eye. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope, standing in my kitchen where I'd shared countless cups of tea with Gran before she passed. My name is Laurel, and until that moment, I thought I'd process my grandmother's death as well as any doctor could. Being an oncologist, I'm familiar with loss. But nothing prepared me for what that letter contained. Dear Dr. Whitaker, it began formally. In accordance with your grandmother's final wishes, we are to deliver the enclosed key and instructions to you exactly 6 months after her passing. A small brass key fell into my palm as I unfolded the letter. My throat tightened. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to Gran's antique writing desk, the one piece of furniture she never let anyone touch. The contents of the locked drawer, the letter continued, include your grandmother's personal diary and several documents she believed you should see. She was explicit that these materials be reviewed by you alone. My phone buzzed. Mother's name flashed across the screen. Marjorie Whitaker. 20 years of minimal contact, and suddenly she was calling daily since Gran's death. I let it go to voicemail, just like I had every other time. Laurel, honey. Her message played later as I poured a generous glass of wine. Clyde and I were thinking about visiting next weekend. There are some things we need to discuss about your grandmother's estate. I deleted the message before it finished. Classic Marjorie, absent for most of my life until money entered the equation. The same woman who left me with Gran when I was 12, running off with Clyde Harrington to start a new family, one without the burden of a preteen daughter. The key felt heavy in my pocket as I drove to Gran's house, my house now, though I hadn't changed a thing since the funeral. The porch light still burned, just as she'd always kept it. For strays, she used to say, both the four-legged and two-legged kind. Inside, everything remained exactly as she'd left it. The writing desk stood in its corner of the study, dark mahogany gleaming in the afternoon light. I approached it slowly, running my fingers along its smooth surface, remembering how Gran would shoo me away whenever she caught me trying to peek inside. The key slid in perfectly. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age, and beneath it, a stack of letters bound with faded ribbon. My hands shook as I lifted out the journal, Gran's familiar handwriting flowing across its pages. The first entry was dated 20 years ago, the day after my mother left. My dearest Laurel, it began, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here to protect you from the truth. There are things you need to know about your mother's departure, things I've kept hidden to spare you pain. But you're stronger now, and it's time you understood the real reason Marjorie left that day. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my half-sister Ruby's name on the screen. Sweet, innocent Ruby, who'd tried so hard over the years to bridge the gap between our broken family halves. I hesitated, then declined the call. Whatever secrets this journal held, whatever truths Gran had kept hidden, they could change everything. The carefully constructed walls I'd built around my heart, the professional distance I'd maintained from my mother's new family, all of it might crumble once I turned these pages. I poured another glass of wine and settled into Gran's favorite reading chair. Outside, storm clouds gathered, casting the study in shadows. Perfect weather for unearthing family secrets. Taking a deep breath, I began to read. Gran's diary entry from that night hit me like a punch to the gut. I had to set it down, my hands trembling as I paced the study. The storm outside had picked up, rain pelting against the windows like accusations. Your mother came to me that morning, Gran had written, desperate and afraid. She said Clyde had given her an ultimatum, leave with him that day, or he'd ensure she never saw a penny of his family's money again.
But there was more to it than that.
Something darker that made her hands shake as she spoke. The entry ended there, the next page torn out. Classic Gran, leaving breadcrumbs instead of answers. I was about to close the diary when something slipped from between its pages, a photograph I'd never seen before. My mother, much younger, holding me as a baby. But it was her expression that caught me off guard. She was looking at me with such raw love it made my chest ache. The doorbell rang, startling me so badly I dropped the photo. Through the rain-streaked window, I caught a glimpse of Ruby's red umbrella. "I know you're in there," she called out, her voice muffled by the storm. "Your car's outside, Laurel. Please, we need to talk." I considered pretending I wasn't home, but Ruby had inherited Gran's persistence. She'd camp out all night if she had to. "You look terrible," she said when I opened the door. She brushed past me, shaking water from her coat. "Have you been crying?" "I don't cry," I said automatically, but my reflection in the hallway mirror betrayed me. "What are you doing here, Ruby?" "Dad's planning something." She twisted her hands together, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "He's been making calls, meeting with lawyers. I overheard him tell Mom that he's found a way to contest Gran's will." The diaries suddenly felt like it was burning a hole through the desk drawer.
He can't.
"The will is ironclad. There's something else." Ruby lowered her voice, glancing around as if Clyde might materialize from the shadows. "He's got papers, old ones, from before Mom married him." I couldn't see what they were, but a crash from upstairs cut her off. We both froze, staring at the ceiling. "I thought you said you were here alone," Ruby whispered. I was already moving toward the stairs, grabbing Gran's old tennis racket from the umbrella stand, the closest thing to a weapon within reach. Ruby followed close behind, her phone's flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. The noise had come from Gran's bedroom. The door stood slightly ajar, though I distinctly remembered closing it earlier. Inside, the window was open, curtains billowing in the wind, rain soaking into the carpet. And there, silhouetted against the lightning, was a figure hunched over Gran's dresser, rifling through the drawers. "Stop right there," I commanded, wielding the tennis racket like a sword. The figure straightened slowly, turning to face us. In the next flash of lightning, I recognized the sharp features and perfectly styled hair, even after all these years. "Hello, Laurel," said Aunt Opal, clutching a stack of papers to her chest. "I was hoping to avoid this particular family reunion. What are you doing here?" My voice shook with anger. "How did you get in?" "Your grandmother gave me a key years ago." Opal's smile was razor-thin. "She knew someone would need to clean up after she was gone. Some things are better left buried, dear. For everyone's sake." "Behind me," Ruby gasped. "Those are the same kind of papers Dad has." Opal's expression flickered. "So Clyde found his copy. I should have known he wouldn't let this go." She straightened her spine, every inch the proper lady she'd always pretended to be. "We need to talk, Laurel, about what really happened the day your mother left." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the papers in Opal's hands. In that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a contract, my mother's signature bold at the bottom. The truth, it seemed, was about to get a lot more complicated. The contract in Aunt Opal's hands was dated exactly 1 week before my mother left. I stared at it through burning eyes as we sat in Gran's kitchen, the storm still raging outside. Ruby had made coffee none of us were drinking. "It's a custody agreement," Opal said, sliding the papers across the table. "Your mother signed away her parental rights. Not because of Clyde's ultimatum, but because of something else entirely." My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I read. Legal jargon filled the pages, but one paragraph stood out. "In exchange for maintaining silence regarding the events of March 15, 1999, Marjorie Whittaker agrees to." "What happened on March 15th? I demanded. Opal's face tightened. "That's not my story to tell." "But your mother didn't abandon you for money, Laurel. She left to protect you." Ruby leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. "Protect her from what?" Before Opal could answer, my phone buzzed. Marjorie's name flashed on the screen again, but this time, there was a text. "Clyde knows about the contract. He's coming for the house. Don't let him in." As if on cue, headlights swept across the kitchen windows. A car door slammed. "He followed me," Ruby whispered, face pale. "I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful." Opal moved faster than I'd ever seen her move, gathering the papers. "Get these somewhere safe.
Now."
Heavy footsteps on the porch. Then pounding on the door. "Laurel." Clyde's voice boomed through the house. Open up. We need to discuss your grandmother's estate. I shoved the contract into Gran's recipe box and thrust it at Ruby. Back door. Go to my apartment. Don't stop for anything. Ruby hesitated only a moment before slipping out through the kitchen. The pounding continued. I know you're in there. Your aunt's car is outside. A pause. Don't make me call the police, Laurel. I have documentation proving your grandmother wasn't of sound mind when she changed her will. Opal's laugh was bitter. Documentation he fabricated, no doubt. She straightened her spine. Let him in. It's time we ended this charade. Are you insane? I hissed, but I was already moving toward the door. 20 years of questions were about to be answered, one way or another. Clyde burst in the moment I turned the lock, rain dripping from his expensive coat. He'd aged since I'd last seen him, but his eyes were still cold and calculating. Where is it? He demanded, scanning the room. Hello to you too, stepfather, I said, ice in my voice. Please come in. Make yourself at home. Don't play games with me, girl. That contract could ruin everything I've built. The contract you used to blackmail my mother? The words felt like poison in my mouth. Or is there another one I should know about? Clyde's face darkened. Your mother made her choice. She knew what would happen if she ever told you the truth about that night. What truth? My voice cracked. What was so terrible that she had to leave her own daughter? The truth, a new voice said from the doorway, about what your father really did to me. We all turned. There stood my mother, soaked from the rain, looking smaller than I remembered. But her eyes were steel as she faced Clyde. You promised, he growled. You signed. I promised to stay quiet to protect my daughter, Marjorie said. But she's not a child anymore. And I'm done letting you use my past against me. She turned to me, tears mixing with raindrops on her face. Your father didn't die in an accident, Laurel. He was murdered. And Clyde. She took a shuddering breath. Clyde helped cover it up. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating all our faces in stark white. The guilty, the innocent, and those of us somewhere in between. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw for the first time the weight she'd been carrying all these years. The choice she'd made wasn't about money at all. It had been about survival. Police lights flashed silently outside Gran's house as Detective Morris took our statements. It was nearly midnight, and the truth about my father's death hung in the air like smoke. Clyde had disappeared into the back of a patrol car an hour ago, leaving chaos in his wake. Let me get this straight, Morris said, reviewing his notes. Your father's car accident in '99 wasn't an accident at all? My mother sat across from me, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She hadn't stopped shaking. Frank was going to expose Clyde's embezzlement scheme. The brake lines in his car weren't cut by accident. I stood up abruptly, needing to move. 20 years of believing my father had died because of black ice on a dark road, and now this. Why didn't you tell someone? Why didn't you go to the police back then? Because of these. Aunt Opal spread out more papers on the table, photographs this time. They showed my father's car, but there was something else. Something that made my stomach turn. Clyde made it look like your father had been drinking. He planted evidence. Made sure your mother knew that if she talked, everyone would believe Frank died driving drunk with his 12-year-old daughter in the car. The room spun slightly. I'd been in the car that night. I remembered Dad dropping me at a friend's house just hours before the crash. He threatened to destroy Frank's reputation, my mother whispered. To make you grow up believing your father was responsible for his own death. I couldn't let that happen. Detective Morris's pen scratched across his notepad. And MS. Whitaker, Evelyn, she knew about this. Gran knew everything, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. That's why she left me the diary. She was making sure the truth would come out after she was gone. A soft knock at the door made us all jump. Ruby stood there, still clutching Gran's recipe box with the contract inside. Dad's lawyer is here, she said quietly. He's saying there's no proof. That it's all hearsay after 20 years. The detective's face remained carefully neutral. Physical evidence from that long ago will be difficult to recover. Without a confession, There's more. My mother's voice had changed, stronger now. She reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. I've been collecting evidence for years. Bank records, emails, conversations I recorded. I knew someday Clyde would slip up, get too confident. When he started pushing about Evelyn's estate, I knew it was time. Morris took the drive like it might explode. You've been building a case against your own husband? I've been waiting for a chance to protect my daughter. Both my daughters. She looked at Ruby, then at me. I should have done it sooner. I'm so sorry, Laurel. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just protecting myself from having to face what I'd done. Ruby moved to sit beside our mother, taking her hand. The gesture was so simple, so forgiving, it made my throat tight. There's something else you should see, Opal said, pulling one final envelope from her bag. Evelyn wrote this the day before she died. She made me promise to keep it until we had proof about Frank's death. The letter inside was in Gran's familiar handwriting, but shakier than I remembered. As I read, my hands began to tremble. My dearest Laurel, it began, by now you know the truth about your father. What you don't know is that he left something for you. Something Clyde has been searching for all these years. I looked up at my mother, whose eyes had gone wide with recognition. The evidence, she breathed. The original evidence of Clyde's embezzlement. Frank hid it somewhere in this house before he died. That's the real reason Clyde wanted the estate. He's still looking for it. Detective Morris was already reaching for his radio. We need to get a forensics team in here.
Now.
Outside, more police cars were arriving. But I barely noticed. I was already moving toward Gran's study, my mind racing. If Dad had hidden something in this house 20 years ago, there was only one place he would have put it. The same place I used to hide my own secrets as a child, behind the loose brick in the study fireplace. The loose brick slid out easily, as if it had been waiting all these years for my touch. Inside was a dusty manila envelope, sealed with my father's familiar scrawl across the front. For my Laurel, when the time is right. Did you find something? Detective Morris called from the doorway. Before I could answer, Ruby's scream pierced the air. He's out. Dad's out on bail. My mother appeared behind Morris, face ashen. That's impossible. The evidence. His family's lawyers moved fast, Morris said grimly. We need to get that envelope into evidence now. I clutched the package to my chest, my father's last message to me. I need 5 minutes with this first. Laurel. My mother stepped forward. We don't have time. 5 minutes, I repeated, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. You've had 20 years to process this. I need 5 minutes. I locked myself in Gran's bathroom, hands shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, photographs, and a letter. But what caught my eye was a small key card with a bank logo and safety deposit box number. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello, Laurel. Clyde's voice was eerily calm. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. No? Ask your mother about December 12, 1998. Ask her what really happened to those missing funds before your father started investigating me. The bathroom door rattled. Laurel?
It was Ruby.
Dad's car just pulled up outside. I stared at the documents in my hands. December 12, 1998. There it was, a transfer record with my mother's signature. She was in on it, I whispered. At the beginning. Smart girl, Clyde said. Your mother helped me set up those accounts. She only turned on me when your father found out. She's not the victim she pretends to be. The front door slammed downstairs. Heavy footsteps. I'm coming up, Clyde called out. Let's handle this like family. I cracked open the bathroom door. Ruby stood there, tears streaming down her face. Mom's gone. She just ran out the back door. Of course, she had. Running was what she did best. Get these to Morris. I shoved the envelope at Ruby. Go out the window, down the trellis like we used to. Don't stop for anything. What about you? I pulled Gran's diary from my pocket. I need answers first. Laurel? Clyde's voice was closer now. Let's talk about a deal. Ruby squeezed my hand before disappearing through the window. I walked out to face my stepfather, Gran's diary held tight against my chest. He stood at the top of the stairs, still in his expensive suit despite the late hour. "Where are the documents?"
Gone.
"Like your leverage over my mother." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You really think she's worth protecting? After everything she's done?" "I'm not protecting her." The diary's spine crackled under my grip. "I'm finishing what my father started. Your father was a fool who didn't understand business." "My father," I said quietly, "taught me where to hide things. Want to know what else he taught me?" Clyde took a step forward. "Don't play games. He taught me that the truth always comes out." December 12th, 1998. "I know Mom helped you. But I also know from Gran's diary that she tried to stop you once she realized what you were really doing. That's why you needed her gone, why you threatened her with my father's reputation." His face darkened. "You have no proof. I have Gran's diary. I have Ruby's testimony about your threats. And I have." I pulled out my phone, showing him the recording icon. "Your confession from downstairs earlier. The police may have let you go, but they're going to love hearing this." Clyde lunged forward just as Detective Morris appeared behind him, gun drawn. "That's enough," Morris said. "Hands where I can see them." As they led Clyde away again, I saw my mother standing in the garden, watching through tears. She took a step toward the house, but I turned away. Some betrayals cut too deep for second chances. Or so I thought. 3 days after Clyde's arrest, I found myself sitting in the safety deposit box vault, staring at the contents of box 2317. My father's final evidence lay scattered before me: photos, ledgers, and a videotape labeled insurance. But it was the handwritten confession that made my hands shake. My mother's confession, dated the day before my father died. The bank manager cleared his throat. "Dr. Whitaker, your sister's here." Ruby looked exhausted as she slid into the chair beside me. "Mom's asking for you. She's not doing well." "She's doing exactly what she's always done," I said, spreading out the confession. "Running, hiding, lying." She tried to make it right. Ruby's voice cracked. "That confession proves it. She was going to turn herself in, turn Dad in too. And Dad died before she could." The words tasted bitter. How convenient. The police found something else. Ruby pulled out her phone, showing me a video. Security footage from the bank, dated December 12th, 1998. My mother, younger and terrified, standing at a teller window while Clyde loomed behind her. His hand gripping her arm, hidden from the teller's view. "She was his victim too," Ruby whispered. I shoved back from the table. Don't make excuses for her. She had choices." "Like what? Let him kill Dad sooner? Let him come after you." Ruby's voice rose. "You read Gran's diary. You know what Clyde was capable of." The diary. I'd been avoiding its final pages, afraid of what else I might learn. Afraid Gran's last words might force me to forgive when all I wanted was justice. My phone buzzed. "Detective Morris. Clyde made bail again. Higher-ups intervening. Watch your back." Ruby read the message over my shoulder. "He'll come for the evidence. For all of us. Let him try." I gathered the documents, but Ruby grabbed my wrist. "You sound just like Dad did."
Her words hit like a slap.
All righteous anger and no self-preservation. Look where that got him. "What do you expect me to do? Forgive and forget?" "I expect you to survive." Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "Mom's in the hospital because she finally stood up to him. She took pills, Laurel. They're saying she might not make it." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "She left a note. For you." Ruby pulled out an envelope, hospital letterhead visible through the thin paper. "She said if anything happened to her, you'd find the rest of Dad's evidence in her old music box. The one she left behind when she abandoned me." I stared at the envelope, remembering that music box. The one that played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The one I'd smashed against the wall the day after she left. Oh God. The realization hit like ice water. The pieces. I threw them away. What pieces? The music box. I destroyed it. My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair. if there was evidence inside. Ruby's phone rang. Her face went pale as she listened. We have to go.
Now.
Dad's been to the house. He's torn it apart looking for something, and now he's heading to the hospital. To Mom. I looked down at the confession in my hands. 20 years of anger and betrayal warred with the image of my mother, young and frightened, Clyde's hand leaving bruises on her arm. If we lose her, Ruby's voice broke. If he gets to her before she wakes up, we'll never know the whole truth. The truth. I'd been so focused on exposing it, on finally understanding why my family had shattered, that I hadn't considered the cost. Now my mother was dying, Clyde was free, and the final pieces of evidence might be sitting in a landfill somewhere, destroyed by my own teenage rage. Sometimes revenge doesn't taste like justice at all. Sometimes it tastes like ashes and regret. Let's go, I said, pocketing the confession. It's time to end this. One way or another. The hospital corridor stretched before me like a gauntlet. Ruby had gone to get security, leaving me alone outside my mother's room. Through the window, I could see her still form, tubes and wires making her look smaller than I remembered. Movement at the end of the hall caught my eye.
Clyde.
I slipped into the room, quietly closing the door. My mother's heart monitor beeped steadily as I pulled Gran's diary from my bag, finally opening to those last pages I'd been avoiding. I knew you'd come. I spun around. My mother's eyes were open, clear despite the medication. Save your strength, I said, moving toward the call button. She caught my wrist. The music box. Did you find it? I destroyed it. 20 years ago. A faint smile touched her lips.
No.
You didn't. Her voice was barely a whisper. Your grandmother? She saved the pieces. Built a false bottom. In her jewelry box. The door opened. Clyde stood there, his expensive suit incongruous against the sterile hospital walls. Family reunion? His smile didn't reach his eyes. How touching. It's over, Clyde. I positioned myself between him and the bed. We have everything. The confession, the bank footage, Dad's evidence. You have pieces of a puzzle you don't understand. He closed the door behind him. Your father was going to destroy everything I'd built. Your mother helped me stop him. She was trying to protect me, I said, but doubt crept in. You threatened her. Did I? He pulled out his phone, showing me an old email. From my mother to him, dated the day before Dad died. Read it. My hands shook as I took the phone. Meet me at the usual place. Frank suspects nothing. Everything's arranged.
No.
My mother's voice was stronger now. Show her the rest. Clyde's face darkened.
Marjorie?
The rest of the email thread, she insisted. The part where you threatened to hurt Laurel if I didn't help you. The part where you admitted to tampering with Frank's car. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Ruby's voice raised an argument with hospital security. It doesn't matter now. Clyde moved closer to the bed. None of you will testify. Not if you want to keep your medical license, Laurel. Did you think I wouldn't find out about those prescriptions you wrote for your grandmother? The ones that helped ease her passing? My breath caught. Gran's last days. The pain medication. Leave her alone. My mother struggled to sit up. I've already sent copies of everything to the police. Everything, Clyde. Including what you did to your first wife. The monitor's beeping accelerated as Clyde reached for my mother. I moved without thinking, years of suppressed rage finally finding their target. The diary flew from my hands as I shoved him back, papers scattering across the floor. Among them, fluttering like leaves, were photographs. Not from the music box or Dad's evidence, but from Gran's diary. Photos of a young woman, bruised and frightened. Clyde's first wife. Gran knew, I whispered. She knew all along. She tried to warn Frank. My mother's voice cracked. That's why I had to choose. You or him. I chose you. Clyde lunged for the photos, but the door burst open. Ruby stood there with Detective Morris and 2 officers. Actually, Ruby said, holding up her phone, you chose all of us. She'd been recording everything. As they led Clyde away, I picked up Gran's diary. The final entry was short. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of revenge. Forgiveness isn't weakness, my dear Laurel. It's the strength to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. My mother's hand found mine, warm despite everything. I never stopped loving you, she whispered, even when I had to let you hate me. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and shadow. Sometimes the light shows us things we couldn't see in the dark, like the difference between justice and revenge, or the fine line between love and sacrifice. I squeezed my mother's hand, 20 years of anger finally giving way to something else, something that felt almost like hope. 6 months after Clyde's conviction, I stood in Grand Study, my study now, sorting through the last of her belongings. Ruby sat cross-legged on the floor, piecing together the restored music box while our mother watched from the doorway, still moving carefully after her hospital stay. Found it, Ruby announced, fitting the final piece into place. The false bottom slid open with a click, revealing not documents, but a single photograph. My father holding me as a baby, my mother beside him, all of us laughing at something just out of frame. I remember that day, my mother said softly. Frank had just told one of his terrible jokes. I traced the edge of the photo, wondering how different things might have been if we'd stayed frozen in that moment of joy. Why did Gran keep this hidden instead of the evidence? Because evidence proves guilt, Ruby said, wisdom beyond her years in her voice. But this proves there was something worth saving. The doorbell rang. Aunt Opal stood on the porch, clutching a familiar leather-bound book. Found this while packing up my place, she said, holding out another of Gran's diaries. It's from before, everything, when your parents first met. I took the diary but didn't open it. Some stories didn't need to be excavated. Some truths could rest in peace. I'm selling the house, I announced suddenly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. But it's your home, my mother protested. Everything you fought to protect was never about the house. I moved to the window, watching shadows stretch across Gran's garden. It was about understanding why. Why you left, why Dad died, why Gran kept so many secrets. But understanding doesn't mean we have to live in the shadow of those choices forever. Ruby stood, brushing dust from her jeans. Where will you go? There's a practice opening up near the coast. They need an oncologist. I turned back to my family, this patchwork of broken pieces we were slowly fitting back together. It's only an hour away. Close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough to start fresh. My mother's hands trembled as she picked up the music box. When she wound it, Moonlight Sonata filled the room, each note carrying echoes of the past. Your grandmother wrote something else, Opal said quietly. In that last diary. About revenge and forgiveness being 2 sides of the same coin, both ways of holding on to pain. And what's the alternative? I asked. Ruby answered, letting go. Later that night, after everyone had left, I sat in Gran's chair one last time. The study felt different now, lighter somehow. On my laptop, an email from Detective Morris waited. They'd found more of Clyde's victims, other families he'd tried to destroy. My testimony wouldn't be needed at the new trials. I closed the laptop without responding. Let someone else carry the torch of justice. My war was over. The music box sat on the desk, moonlight gleaming off its restored surface. Inside, beneath the false bottom, I'd placed a new photograph, one taken last week at Ruby's graduation. My mother and I flanking her, all of us smiling despite the years of pain between us. Or maybe because of them. Gran's final diary entry had been right. The strongest families aren't the ones that never break, but the ones that learn to rebuild from the pieces. I packed the music box carefully in my bag. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for coastal properties. Something with big windows and a garden, where shadows couldn't linger. Maybe with room for guests. As I locked up the house one last time, I thought I caught a whiff of Gran's perfume, heard the echo of her laugh. But when I turned, there was only moonlight and the soft whisper of leaves in the garden she'd loved so much. Some ghosts, I was learning, don't need to be exorcised. Some can stay, teaching us how to love better, forgive deeper, live fuller. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. I drove away from my grandmother's house for the last time, the music box safe beside me, carrying its cargo of broken melodies and new beginnings. The live stream to Grandpa Everett showed my empty hands first, then panned across my bedroom door. Sweet 16 reveal coming up. I whispered into my phone, trying to contain my excitement. You ready for this, Grandpa? His chuckle crackled through my earbuds. Ready as I'll ever be, sweetheart. I pushed open the door, already imagining how I'd arrange the new art supplies he'd promised me. The words died in my throat. Where my easel should have been, a pristine white crib stood in a shaft of afternoon sunlight. My posters, my paintings, my entire life had been erased. Pale yellow ducks danced across freshly painted walls. Mom, my voice came out smaller than I meant it to. Dad. I heard their voices floating up from downstairs, probably in Dad's study. My feet felt heavy as I descended, still broadcasting. The study door was ajar, and I caught fragments of their conversation. Better this way, Conrad. She'll understand eventually. Marlo, maybe we should have. Should have what? Waited until she came home from school? Given her time to throw one of her dramatic fits. I pushed the door open. Mom stood by the window in her tailored blazer, while Dad slumped in his leather chair, not quite meeting my eyes. What happened to my room? I asked, though I already knew. The nursery theme, the timing, it had to be for Seraphina's baby. Mom's lips tightened into that familiar line of disapproval. Elara, good. We need to discuss some changes. Changes? The word tasted bitter. You mean how you turned my bedroom into a nursery without telling me? Your sister needs that space more than you do right now, Mom said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. We've arranged for you to stay with Aunt Callista. Dad shifted in his chair. It's only temporary, honey.
Until we figure something out.
Figure something out? I gripped my phone tighter, suddenly grateful for Grandpa's silent presence on the other end. I live here. This is my home. Was your home? Mom corrected. Honestly, Elara, you're 16 now. It's time to stop being so self-centered. Your sister is starting a family. She needs our support. The room spun slightly. And what about what I need? What you need, Mom's voice turned sharp, is to grow up and stop making everything about yourself. Callista's expecting you tonight. I've already packed your essential items. I looked at Dad, but he just stared at his hands, shoulders curved inward like he was trying to disappear into his chair. Some defender. Happy birthday to me, I guess, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Thanks for the heads up. Don't be dramatic, Mom sighed. Your aunt's place is perfectly nice, and it's closer to your school. This is hardly the tragedy you're making it out to be. I backed toward the door, my hand finding the doorknob. You're right, Mom. It's not a tragedy. It's just really, really clear where I stand with you both. As I turned to leave, I caught Dad's flinch, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his coffee cup. Mom's reflection in the window showed something flicker across her face, not guilt, exactly, but something close to unease. I ended the live stream as I climbed the stairs, but not before whispering, "Did you get all that, Grandpa?" His response was immediate and grim. Every word, sweetheart. Every single word. Standing in what used to be my room, I ran my fingers along the crib's smooth, white railing. The nursery was beautiful, really. Perfect for the golden child's perfect baby. But as I traced one of those cheerful yellow ducks, I made a promise to myself. This wouldn't be the end of the story. Not by a long shot. Aunt Callista's spare room smelled like lavender and fresh paint. She'd stayed up late helping me hang fairy lights across the ceiling, transforming the plain walls into something almost magical. But at 3 in the morning, even magic couldn't quiet my mind. My phone buzzed. A text from Seraphina. "Mom says you're being difficult about the nursery. Can't you think about someone else for once?" I switched off my phone and padded downstairs, following the sound of clinking dishes. Aunt Callista stood at the kitchen counter, her dark hair messy from sleep, stirring something in a pot. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, not turning around. "How'd you know it was me?" Because you walk exactly like your mother used to, before she started wearing those ridiculous heels everywhere. She poured hot chocolate into 2 mugs, adding a handful of mini marshmallows to mine. Want to talk about it? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Did you know about their plans for my room?
No.
Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Marlo called me yesterday morning, informed me you'd be staying here. Like I was some kind of hotel service. You could have said no. And leave you where? With them. She sat across from me, her eyes sharp in the dim kitchen light. Do you remember your 10th birthday? I stared into my hot chocolate. The art show one? You spent weeks preparing those paintings. Your teacher even called to say how talented you were. She paused, stirring her drink. Your mother scheduled a client dinner for the same evening. Your father promised he'd come see your work after, but he fell asleep in his study instead. The memory still stung. Mom said I shouldn't have expected them to rearrange their lives for a school art show. You stopped painting after that. Yeah, well, what was the point? The marshmallows in my cocoa had melted into a sweet, sticky swirl. Mom always said art wouldn't pay the bills. Callista's phone chimed. She glanced at it, her expression darkening. Speaking of your mother, what now? She wants me to send you home this weekend for a family dinner. Serafina's announcing her pregnancy officially. She looked up at me. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. I traced the rim of my mug. If I don't, they'll say I'm being selfish again, making everything about me. Like they made your birthday about Serafina? Callista's voice was gentle, but her words hit hard. My phone buzzed again upstairs, probably another text from Serafina. I thought about my sister's perfect life, her successful husband, her growing family, our parents' constant approval. But I'd seen the cracks in her smile at family gatherings, the way her hands shook when Mom criticized her weight or career choices. You know what's funny? I said, breaking the silence. When I was little, I used to think Serafina hung the moon. She'd sneak into my room after Mom and Dad's parties, tell me stories about her college adventures. Then she met Richard, and suddenly it was like she became Mom's mini-me. Callista reached across the table, squeezing my hand. People change, sweetheart. Sometimes not for the better. Yeah. I squeezed back, then stood up. I should try to sleep. Big family dinner to prepare for, right? Alara? Callista called as I reached the stairs. Whatever you're planning, and don't tell me you're not planning something, just remember that revenge might feel good in the moment, but it won't fix what's broken. I paused, thinking about the live stream Grandpa had witnessed, about the way Dad couldn't meet my eyes, about all the birthdays and art shows and moments that had slipped away. Maybe not, I said quietly, but neither will pretending everything's fine. Grandpa Everett's Mercedes pulled into Aunt Callista's driveway exactly 3 days after the birthday incident. I watched from the window as he merged, his usual crisp suit replaced by casual slacks and a sweater. He looked older somehow, tired in a way I'd never seen before. You didn't have to come, I said when he entered, though my tight hug probably gave away how glad I was to see him. Actually, I did. He set a leather briefcase on Callista's coffee table. Especially after what I witnessed on that live stream. Callista appeared with coffee, her expression guarded. Marlo called this morning. She's not happy about you being here, Dad. Marlo hasn't been happy about anything since she married that spineless. He caught himself, glancing at me. Sorry, sweetheart. But we need to discuss something important. He pulled out several documents from his briefcase. I recognized the Whitman Industries letterhead. Your mother's been pressuring me to sign over control of the company, he said, spreading the papers across the table. She claims it's about succession planning, but the timing is interesting, isn't it? The same week they kick me out? I picked up one of the documents, scanning the legal jargon I barely understood. The same week they assume I won't find out about their treatment of you. His voice hardened. They forgot about our weekly video calls, didn't they? Callista leaned forward. What are you planning? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Mom's face appeared on the screen. I showed it to them and Grandpa nodded. Put on speaker. Alara? Mom's voice filled the room. Your father and I expect you at dinner tonight. No excuses. I'm studying with. This isn't a request. Your sister's announcement dinner is important to this family. And since you're still part of this family, despite your recent attitude, you will attend. I caught Grandpa's slight nod.
Fine.
I'll be there. And wear something appropriate. Not those awful ripped jeans. The line went dead. Still part of the family, I echoed. Funny how that works when they need something. Grandpa tapped the papers. They need more than you know. The company's facing some challenges. Nothing serious yet, but enough to make your mother nervous about her position. And Serafina's baby is what? Their backup plan? The perfect family image, Callista murmured. The successful daughter, the precious grandchild, the disposable teenager? I added. Grandpa's expression darkened. You were never disposable, Elara. And it's time your parents remembered that. He pulled out another document. This is my current will. I'm making some changes. Dad, Callista warned. Don't do anything rash. Rash would be letting them continue this behavior. He turned to me. Tonight's dinner? I'll be attending too. Uninvited. My stomach twisted. They'll blame me. Let them. He squeezed my hand. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people we love is to stop enabling their worst behavior. I thought about Mom's controlling voice, Dad's constant silence, Serafina's perfect life built on perfectly crafted lies. What if it makes everything worse? Worse than being erased from your own home? Callista asked softly. Worse than being treated like an inconvenience by the people who should love you most? Grandpa gathered his papers. The question isn't whether this will make things worse, sweetheart. The question is whether you're ready to show them who you really are, someone who won't be pushed aside or forgotten. I picked up my phone, looking at Mom's missed call notification. I guess we'll find out at dinner. Yes, he said, and for a moment I saw a flash of the shrewd businessman who'd built an empire. I suppose we will. I arrived early for Serafina's announcement dinner, slipping in through the kitchen door like I used to when I was late for curfew. Voices drifted from Dad's study, Mom's sharp tone, Dad's quieter murmur, and Serafina's familiar laugh. The company's practically ours already, Mom was saying. Dad's getting sentimental in his old age. All it takes is one grandchild, too. I edged closer to the partially open door. But what about Elara? Serafina asked. She's his favorite. Everyone knows it. Elara is a child, Mom dismissed. She can't run a company. Besides, once the baby comes, Dad will forget all about her artistic phases and teenage dramatics. Marlo, Dad's voice carried a rare note of concern. Maybe we should slow down. The way we handled her birthday. The way we handled it was necessary. That girl needs to learn her place. And with the merger coming up? The merger? Serafina's voice sharpened. What merger? Richard's company, Mom said. Once we announce your pregnancy, the timing will be perfect. A merger between families, securing both companies' futures. Your father-in-law is already on board. My hand flew to my mouth. Richard was Serafina's husband, but he was also the CEO of their biggest competitor. A merger would mean, you're using my baby as a business deal? Serafina's voice cracked. I'm securing our family's future, Mom countered. Something your sister seems determined to undermine with her constant need for attention. Speaking of attention, Dad cut in. Dad's car just pulled up. I backed away from the door, but not fast enough. It swung open, and I found myself face to face with Mom. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her flash of panic. Elara. Her smile was brittle. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. The words came out steadier than I felt. So that's why you wanted the nursery done so quickly. It was never about Serafina's baby. It was about the merger. Serafina appeared behind Mom, one hand protectively over her stomach. Elara, it's not what you think. Really? Because it sounds like Mom's using your baby to manipulate Grandpa and secure a business deal. I met Mom's eyes. That's why you needed me gone, isn't it? Because I might tell him the truth. You understand nothing about business, Mom snapped. About what it takes to protect this family's legacy. Protect it? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You mean control it? like you try to control everything else. The doorbell rang. Dad emerged from the study, adjusting his tie. "That'll be your grandfather." "Perfect timing," I said, watching Mom's face pale slightly. "I'm sure he'd love to hear about the merger plans. About how his great-grandchild is just another business asset." "You wouldn't dare," Mom hissed. I thought about my empty room upstairs, about years of missed art shows and conditional love. About Serafina's face when she learned her baby was just another piece in Mom's game. "Try me," I said, turning toward the door. Mom grabbed my arm. "If you ruin this..." "You'll what? Throw me out again?" Too late. The doorbell rang again. Serafina's hands were shaking. Dad wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. And Mom, for the first time in my life, I saw real fear crack through her perfect facade. I pulled free of her grip and walked toward the front door, my heart pounding but my step steady. Behind me, I heard Mom's heels clicking rapidly across the floor, rushing to beat me there. The game was about to change. I just hoped I was ready for what came next. The college brochures spread across Aunt Callista's kitchen table looked like escape routes. Art programs, photography majors, creative writing departments, everything Mom would hate. Everything I might love. "Berkeley has an excellent fine arts program," Callista said, sliding another pamphlet toward me. "And it's about as far from here as you can get without leaving the country." My phone buzzed. Another message from Serafina. "We need to talk. Alone." I'd been ignoring her texts since the dinner disaster 3 days ago, when Grandpa had stormed out after learning about the merger plans. Mom hadn't spoken to me since, but her silence said enough. "Alara?" Callista tapped the brochure. "You're miles away." "Sorry, My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Richard, Serafina's husband. "Meeting at the office. Important information about your mother's plans. Come alone." "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. "There's something I need to handle." Callista caught my wrist. "Whatever you're planning, remember what happened last time you tried to face them alone. This is different." I showed her Richard's message. "He might have proof about the merger, something we can show Grandpa. Or it could be a trap." She frowned. "At least let me drive you. They'll see your car. I'll take the bus." I grabbed my jacket. Besides, I'm tired of hiding. The corporate office loomed ahead 30 minutes later, all glass and steel and secrets. The security guard barely glanced at my student ID before waving me through. Richard's office was on the top floor, with a view of the city that probably cost more than my college fund, if I even had one anymore. The elevator doors opened to reveal not Richard, but Mom. "I knew you'd come," she said, stepping inside before I could retreat. So predictable.
The doors closed.
We started ascending. "Where's Richard?" "At home with your sister, who, by the way, is absolutely devastated by your betrayal." She pressed the emergency stop button. The elevator jerked to a halt. "We need to talk about your future." "My future?" I laughed. "You mean the one you're trying to control, like everything else?" "I'm trying to protect this family's legacy. Something you seem determined to destroy." She pulled out an envelope. Inside is an acceptance letter to Swiss boarding school. Very exclusive. Very far away. My throat tightened. "You can't force me to go."
"No?"
"Think about Serafina. The stress you're causing could harm her baby. Think about your father. His position in the company depends on this merger." She held out the envelope. "One signature, and you get a fresh start. Isn't that what you want?" The elevator felt smaller by the second. "What I want is a mother who actually cares about me, not just her precious company." "Don't be dramatic. This is a generous offer. Take it before I change my mind." I looked at the envelope, then at her perfectly composed face. "You know what's funny? I used to think Serafina was the lucky one. Your perfect daughter, your pride and joy. But she's just as trapped as I am, isn't she?" Something flickered in Mom's eyes. Fear? Recognition? Before she could respond, my phone chimed. A message from Grandpa. "Don't sign anything. On my way." Mom saw the text. Her hand tightened on the envelope. "Time to choose, Alara. Your family's stability or your selfish desires." What's it going to be? The elevator hummed around us, suspended between floors like my answer hung between us. I thought about the college brochures, about Serafina's shaking hands, about years of trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I reached for the envelope. I took the envelope from Mom's hand and ripped it in half. The sound echoed in the elevator like a gunshot. "That was a mistake," she said, her voice deadly quiet. The elevator jerked back to life, ascending to the top floor. When the doors opened, I found Dad and Richard waiting, along with 2 security guards. "I tried to give you an easy way out," Mom said, stepping past me. "Now we do this the hard way." Richard held up a document. "Sign this, and we forget the scene you caused at dinner. Your grandfather never learns about your little outburst." What outburst? I looked between them. The truth about how you're using Serafina's baby to manipulate him? "The truth," Dad finally spoke, "is that you've become unstable. Dangerous to this family's reputation." "Dangerous?" I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Because I won't play along with your games anymore?" Mom nodded to the security guards. "Show her." One guard pulled out a tablet, playing a video of me at the dinner. But something was wrong. The footage had been edited, making me look unhinged, aggressive. My words about the merger were cut out, replaced with what looked like a jealous rant about Serafina's baby. "Social media is so unpredictable," Richard said smoothly. "Once something goes viral—" "You wouldn't," I whispered, but I knew they would. "Sign the papers," Mom said. "Agree to the boarding school, or this video goes public. Think about what that would do to your college applications, to your future." The elevator dinged again. Grandpa emerged, followed by Aunt Callista. Relief flooded through me until I saw their faces. "I saw the video," Grandpa said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Ilara, how could you?" "What?" "No, it's fake." I tried to tell them. Callista cut in, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "But the footage—" Mom stepped forward, all concern and maternal worry. "We've been trying to handle this privately, Dad. Ilara's been struggling since we announced Serafina's pregnancy. The therapist suggested a change of environment might help." "I'm not struggling," but my voice cracked, making me sound exactly like the unstable teenager they'd portrayed. "They edited that video. They're trying to force me out because I know about the merger." "Merger?" Richard laughed. "What merger, Mr. Whitman? I assure you, there's no merger. Just a troubled girl who needs help." I turned to Grandpa, desperate. "You know me. You know I wouldn't." "I know you've been under a lot of stress," he said gently. "Maybe your mother's right. Some time away." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Even Grandpa believed their lies. Even he was willing to send me away. "The papers," Mom pressed, holding out a pen. "Sign them, and we handle this as a family. Refuse, and the video goes public." I looked at each face in turn. Dad, avoiding my eyes as usual. Richard, smug and certain of victory. Callista, torn between loyalty and the evidence before her. Grandpa, his faith in me shattered by their careful manipulation. And Mom, finally showing real emotion, triumph. My hand shook as I took the pen. The document was filled with legal terms, but one phrase stood out: voluntary commitment to residential treatment facility. Not boarding school, a psychiatric facility. "Last chance, Ilara," Mom said softly. "Choose wisely." My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Serafina. "Don't sign anything. I have proof. Hold on." But as I looked up at the wall of faces against me, at the carefully constructed trap they'd laid, I realized something terrible. Sometimes holding on hurts more than letting go. I pressed the pen to paper, my signature the only weapon I had left. The residential facility's admission papers felt heavy in my hands. Just as I pressed the pen to paper, the office door burst open. Serafina stood there, breathing hard, one hand protectively over her stomach. "Stop," she commanded, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Nobody's signing anything." Mom stepped forward. "Serafina, you shouldn't be here in your condition." "My condition?" Serafina laughed, sharp and bitter. "You mean the condition you've been using to manipulate everyone?" She pulled out her phone. I recorded everything, Mother. Your conversation with Richard about the merger. The plans to use my baby to secure Grandpa's fortune. Even your instructions to the video editor about doctoring Alara's footage. The room went deadly quiet. Richard's smug expression cracked. Dad's face drained of color. You're lying, Mom said, but her voice wavered. Am I? Serafina pressed play. Mom's voice filled the room, crystal clear. Edit out anything about the merger. Make her look unstable. Once she's committed, no one will believe her anyway. Grandpa moved faster than I'd ever seen him move. He snatched the commitment papers from my hands, tearing them to shreds. Marlowe, he said, his voice shaking with rage. What have you become? Dad, I can explain. Explain what? Callista cut in. How you were willing to commit your own daughter to a psychiatric facility to protect your lies? Mom's composure finally shattered. Everything I did was to protect this family's legacy. The merger would have secured all our futures. If Alara had just stayed quiet, if I had just disappeared, I finished for her. Like I've been disappearing my whole life. Staying quiet at missed birthdays, ignored art shows, every time you chose the company over me. You ungrateful. She lunged forward, but Serafina stepped between us. Enough, Mother. I won't let you do to my child what you did to Alara. This ends now. Richard moved toward the door. This is ridiculous. I never agreed to. Sit down, Grandpa commanded. Nobody leaves until we settle this. He turned to Mom, his expression hard. You're done here, Marlowe. As of this moment, you're removed from the company board. The merger is canceled. You can't. I can and I will. The company goes to Callista and Alara. Serafina too, if she wants it. He looked at each of us in turn. It's time this family remembered what actually matters. Mom's face contorted. Conrad, say something. Dad stood up slowly. For the first time in my memory, he met Mom's gaze directly. I should have said something 16 years ago. He turned to me.
I'm sorry, Alara.
I was a coward. A coward? Mom's laugh was hysterical. You're all cowards, destroying everything I built. You built nothing, Serafina interrupted. You just controlled and manipulated until you got what you wanted. But you forgot something, Mother. You forgot that real family can't be bought or controlled. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw past the perfect exterior to the scared little girl who'd once told me bedtime stories, who'd been just as trapped as I was. The video, I said quietly. Release it. Everyone stared at me. Release the real video. I continued. Let everyone see the truth. No more hiding. Mom's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Serafina's finger hovered over her phone. Try us. In that moment, looking at Mom's crumbling facade, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about finally being strong enough to walk away. I took Serafina's hand. Come on, sis. Let's go home. Not to the house with its empty rooms and hollow promises, but to somewhere new, somewhere real. 6 months later, I stood in front of my easel at Berkeley's Spring Art Showcase, watching people study my piece. The painting showed a nursery, but not the perfect one Mom had designed. This one was real. Shadows in the corners, imperfect walls, and a golden light that made even the flaws beautiful. It's haunting, a voice said behind me. I turned to find Serafina, her baby daughter sleeping against her shoulder. Though the yellow ducks are a nice touch. I thought about painting them white, I admitted, but some things deserve to stay bright. She smiled, adjusting the sleeping baby. Mom asked about you yesterday. I think she finally looked at the therapy pamphlets Dad gave her. And nothing. But she's trying. Maybe that's something. Grandpa and Callista appeared, arguing good-naturedly about the company's new direction. The art therapy program for at-risk teens had been my idea, but Callista had made it happen. Even Dad had started volunteering, teaching photography on weekends. Your mother's letter came, Grandpa said quietly, holding out a worn envelope. The one she wrote before you were born. I thought you should have it. I took it, feeling its weight. Did you read it?
No.
But I remember when she wrote it.
She was different then. Softer.
Before the company became everything. I slipped the letter into my pocket unopened. Maybe someday I'd want to read about the mother she used to be, but not today. Today was about who I was becoming. The scholarship committee's here, Callista whispered, nodding toward a group of professors. Ready to show them your portfolio? Actually, I said, I want to show them something else first. I led them to the back of the gallery, where a larger canvas waited under a sheet. This painting had taken months, countless drafts, and more courage than I knew I had. I pulled off the sheet. The painting showed our family, but not in the perfect posed way of old portraits. Instead, it captured real moments. Serafina reading stories to her daughter, Callista and Grandpa laughing over coffee, Dad behind his camera. Even Mom was there, distant but present, a shadow beginning to take new shape. And in the center, a teenage girl at an easel, finally visible, finally whole. Oh, sweetheart, Callista breathed. It's called Family Portrait Unfinished, I explained. Because we're all still working on it, aren't we? Serafina squeezed my hand. Always. Later, after the scholarship committee had left, with an offer I couldn't refuse, and the gallery had emptied, I found myself alone with my paintings. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. The new art therapy program. It's good work. You're good at this. Not an apology. Not yet. But maybe, like my painting, we were all unfinished works in progress. I thought about the unopened letter in my pocket, about the mother she'd been and the one she'd become, about how sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing your parents are growing too, in their own imperfect ways. Another text came through, this one from Dad. Proud of you, kiddo. Always have been. I looked at my family portrait one last time before covering it for the night. The shadows were there, but so was the light, making even the darkest corners glow with possibility. Just like the nursery painting, it wasn't perfect. But maybe perfect wasn't the point. Maybe the point was learning to see beauty in the broken places, strength in the struggles, and hope in the spaces we leave blank, waiting to be filled with whatever comes next. I turned off the gallery lights and stepped into the evening, ready for my next canvas. The day my mother uttered those words, my world went pitch black. If I had known about your developmental disorder, I wouldn't have had you. You are an unnecessary existence for our family, she declared, her voice cold and sharp. My father, oblivious to the devastation he was inflicting, leaned out the car window and shouted, "Let's go. From now on, a new life begins for the three of us." They left me behind, laughing as they drove away. I stood there, frozen, a 10-year-old girl named Tracy, abandoned by the only family I had ever known. Fast forward 15 years, and I was turning 25. My twin brother, Tony, and I had been living apart for over a decade due to the events that unfolded that chilling March day. My childhood was ordinary. My father worked a regular job, and my mother juggled part-time work and being a housewife. We were an average family, like so many others. But everything changed when we started elementary school. My brother's academic talents blossomed. He consistently aced tests, and my mother said, "Tony, you got a perfect score again. You are so talented and destined for greatness." My father would chime in with booming laughter. He might become a scholar, a doctor, or maybe an athlete. At least he won't have to worry about money. Meanwhile, I struggled. The constant sounds of shuffling chairs and the clicking of mechanical pencils distracted me in class. I couldn't concentrate, leading to frequent scolding from teachers. As I was reprimanded, my parents showered my brother with attention. Meals were always tailored to his preferences, and he was the only one taken on outings and fun adventures. He could have anything he wanted, anytime. I, on the other hand, was largely ignored. If I had spoken to teachers or other adults about my parents' neglect, maybe things could have changed. But I couldn't bring myself to speak up. I struggled with verbal communication and expressing my emotions. My words were jumbled and scattered. As an adult, I could communicate my thoughts, but I still felt misunderstood, often giving irrelevant responses. According to my mother, I was born with a mild developmental disorder. While I had made progress as an adult, I still faced significant challenges. As a child, I was difficult for adults to handle, but that wasn't a reason to neglect me. I was growing, learning, and evolving. My parents, however, saw me as a naive child, often looking down on me and comparing me to my talented brother. They held absolute authority, and I, unable to rebel, simply smiled and endured their words and actions. My relationship with Tony, once close, also began to shift as he grew older. My excellent brother didn't try to understand me. He started to treat me with disdain. "Don't talk to me at school," he'd say. "It's good our faces are different. I wouldn't want anyone to think we're siblings. Keep quiet, you're stupid." The kind words he once used disappeared, replaced by disdain. He treated me as if I were disgusting, eventually ignoring me completely. Naturally, my parents didn't notice or care about how Tony treated me. I no longer received their attention or affection. My days were reduced to receiving minimal care, and even on special occasions like birthdays and Christmas, I was left alone. My parents would take Tony out to eat, while I was left with a supermarket-bought meal and a discount sticker. Even on New Year's Eve, I was confined to my room. "You stay in your room," my father told me, "because I can't concentrate with you around." My New Year's celebration consisted of eating snacks alone in my room, straining to hear the happy voices from the living room. "You don't need study materials, do you?" "Since you can't do anything," my parents said, matter-of-factly. Tony, however, received a desk and educational supplies. I lost all motivation to study, and my grades plummeted. I felt like I had no place at school or home. The only solace I found was with my grandparents, who lived far away. We could only visit them twice a year, during summer and end-of-year holidays, and I was forbidden from speaking. My grandparents' house was in a nature-rich countryside, which my brother and parents found boring. But for me, it was a wonderland. I was mesmerized by the beauty of nature, spending hours coloring on the back of flyers, and trying to capture the vibrant landscapes. My parents and brother scorned my drawings, but my grandparents hung them on the refrigerator, saying, "It's a beautiful drawing of the sunset." I felt an unprecedented joy, not just because they displayed my scribbles, but because they understood what I wanted to express without words. They loved my brother, but treated us twins equally, making my visits to their house a source of emotional support. Then, one chilly day in March, just as spring break began, my parents dropped a bombshell. "We've sold our apartment," my father announced. Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" My brother snickered, "You're really stupid. It's been sold. A new life awaits us in a new house. If the house is sold, where will we live? What about school? When is the move? Why?" I was overwhelmed by the sudden news. My father yelled angrily, "Shut up. Your talk is always pointless. It's because you didn't notice, even though we've been preparing for a long time. Pack your stuff quickly." Until that moment, I hadn't realized the living room was already packed up. Confined to my room, I hadn't noticed things gradually disappearing from the house. Panicking, I held back tears and packed my belongings into cardboard boxes. I could only take a few toys and a minimal amount of clothes. It was spring break, so I had most of my belongings at school, which I quickly packed. "I'm ready," I said. "Everything is packed in boxes. I've got my school bag too. But anything else we don't need." My father tossed my cardboard box into the trunk of the car and told me to get in. But Tony wasn't there. "Tony isn't here," I said. "Where's Tony? It can't be just us three going, right? Aren't we missing some luggage?" My mother snapped, "Aren't you supposed to be quiet in the car?" I fell silent. "It's hard to understand you," she said. "We gave your brother some pocket money and let him go out to play. Be quiet if you understand." In the silence, I stared absent-mindedly at the blossoming trees outside the car window. A flicker of hope ignited in my heart. Maybe they were taking me to a fun place, just like they used to take only Tony. Perhaps they were trying to surprise me with the move. I unconsciously smiled. My parents were quietly talking, but I was too excited to care about what they were saying. I never imagined that my joy would be so cruelly betrayed. I eventually fell asleep and was abruptly awakened by my mother's loud voice. "Wake up quickly. Take your school bag and get out of the car." Disoriented, I got out of the car and was stunned by the scene before me. We were in front of my grandparents' house. Yay! Grandma! Grandpa! I tried to open the door, but it was locked. Mom, I can't get in. It's a weekday, so they are probably still at work, my mother said. But I just called them. They will be back soon, I said. My father roughly placed my luggage in front of the entrance and returned to the car. Feeling anxious, I grabbed my mother's hand. Wait. Where are you going, Mom? Dad, wait. Where are we going? We can't leave your brother alone, can we? My mother shook off my hand and said, your brother got into a famous private elementary school that ensures progression through grades. He's already decided to transfer there starting next term. We sold the apartment as part of the tuition, and we're moving to a new house for him. But having you around distracts him and adds extra food costs. With a new term starting, this is your chance to stay here. Wait, what's happening? Am I changing schools? Am I going to a different school? That's exactly what annoys me. My mother yelled, her anger rising. I was speechless. You've always been a burden to me since you were little. Your grades are poor, and your appearance is below average. You can't even hold a proper conversation. Your brother is such a good child. Why do you always cause problems? Did I do something bad? If so, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't need empty apologies. If I had known about your developmental disorder, I wouldn't have had you. You are an unnecessary existence for our family. My world went dark. Let's go. From now on, a new life begins for the three of us. My father stuck his head out the car window and declared that loudly. I must stop them somehow. Don't go. Don't leave me behind. Dad. Mom. Am I a bad child? Words swirled in my mind, but when I tried to speak, the right words wouldn't come out easily. I desperately moved my mouth, but my mother only glanced at me and got in the car. Sorry for the wait, she said. Since we've come all this way, let's buy a famous cake from around here and eat it with Tony. I could only watch, numb and heartbroken, as my parents drove away, leaving me alone with my grandparents. Tracy, are you okay? My grandfather asked, his voice laced with concern. Tracy, try Grandpa. Through my blurred vision, I saw my grandparents looking at me with worry. I had fallen asleep, waiting for them to return. Your hands are cold, and your face is pale, my grandfather said, wrapping me in a jumper and carrying me to a warm room. My grandparents were moving quickly, talking in angry tones. How long has Tracy been waiting there? They couldn't believe it when they saw a message on their phones. They had been at work. We've left Tracy in front of the house. Please take care of Tracy. They rushed back home immediately. It would have been a disaster if they hadn't found me. My grandfather was a craftsman, and my grandmother worked diligently at a local restaurant. They were busy, but my parents hadn't contacted them in advance. They had only sent a message that day, and the communication ended abruptly. It was a painful reminder of how insignificant I was to my parents. As I sipped the hot milk my grandmother gave me, its warmth soothed my feelings. I couldn't stop my tears. My grandmother gently stroked my back, comforting me. My grandfather stood up and called my father. The discussion escalated quickly, and he slammed down the receiver. Tracy, I talked to your dad, but it seems we can't communicate properly, he said. Can you tell me what happened? Through my tears, I explained the events that had led me to this moment. My story was more disjointed than usual, but my grandparents listened quietly. They said I'm an unnecessary existence because I have a developmental disorder. They said it would have been better if I hadn't been born. Mom and Dad are going to create a new family with Tony. I choked out the words, tears streaming down my face. My grandmother hugged me tightly. What are you talking about? You are a wonderful child, no matter what anyone says. You are irreplaceable to us. I am truly happy that you were born. People's worth isn't determined by their intelligence or appearance. Your grandfather and I are just ordinary elderly people who didn't go to prestigious schools. But we've lived our lives utilizing what we're good at. You might not be good at academics, but you have a talent for sensitivity and expression. That's an irreplaceable talent, uniquely yours. Talent, I whispered. Yes, my grandfather said. There are no adults here to make you sad anymore, so you don't have to worry. I'm sorry for not noticing it until now. You've been doing your best. He stroked my head, and I was overwhelmed with emotion, bursting into tears again. My grandparents held me tight until my sobs subsided. After that, I started living with my grandparents. They enrolled me in a small local elementary school where the teachers were very understanding. One of them was the first person, besides my grandparents, who truly understood me. Because it was a rural area with few students, they implemented an educational program tailored to individual needs, which took my unique characteristics into account and helped me progress. My grades, which had been dismal, started to improve significantly. Even though I struggled with communication, I came to accept my unique traits and eventually made friends. I began to live a relaxed life, both mentally and physically. I found what I truly wanted to do. 15 years passed. During that time, I never heard from my parents or my brother. Their addresses and phone numbers had all changed. Their faces were fading from my memory. Then one day, the sound of someone banging violently on the door shattered the early morning calm. My grandparents were already awake, and I, still groggy, headed to the entrance. After leaving your daughter for over a decade, what do you want now? My grandfather shouted, his voice laced with anger. Startled by my grandfather's words, I stepped outside and widened my eyes. Well, if it isn't Tracy, my mother said. You've grown so much. The mother I remembered was always well kept, but the woman in front of me looked worn out and tired. The man next to her had a belly, a far cry from my father's previously slim figure. Smiling amiably, they reached out their hands in a friendly manner. I avoided their hands and glared at them. If you're my parents, why have you come? Don't talk like we're strangers, my mother said. We came to talk. Yes, we are fully aware, my grandfather said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. It seems this workshop is making quite a profit now. Dad has gotten old, and as both a manager and a craftsman, he's reaching his limits, right? That's why we've come back. I thought I'd take over the business, and we heard our lovely daughter is set to inherit from him. That should be ours to receive. My grandfather snorted at their words. Oh, you came back to get a share of the leftovers and even take over the business? How presumptuous. An amateur with no basic knowledge of glass artistry taking over our workshop? We've already decided on our successor. What? Tracy? She will take over? She's a genius? What ridiculousness. This child who can't do anything. My grandmother, as if to interrupt my father, threw a newspaper at his face. What are you doing? Look inside, you fool. There's an article about this workshop. My father flipped through the newspaper, his eyes widening as he alternated between looking at me and the newspaper in shock. Young glass artisan from local workshop to the world. It was an article from a recent interview. By the time I was in middle school, I had become fascinated by my grandfather's work. I had started helping out in the workshop around that time, initially as an assistant. But as I started to actively engage in glass artistry, I quickly became an apprentice in my grandfather's workshop, recognized for my skills. I became passionate about capturing the allure of nature in glass. A few years ago, I finally completed the piece I had dreamed of making and started selling it. It became popular on social media, and I quickly gained recognition, becoming known as a prominent glass artisan. Now, I even receive orders from restaurants and stores abroad, and we have expanded our workshop with more artisans and launched online sales. You are indeed our daughter, not like that useless, timid son, my father said, exaggerating his praise. My mother eagerly nodded along. Useless, timid? I was surprised by the words, so opposite from my memory of my brother. My mother glared at me sharply. Just listen. That useless Tony, she began speaking excitedly. According to her, my brother had graduated from university and landed a job at a top company. Everything was going well initially. But having been praised as excellent for years, he became arrogant and unexpectedly fragile, buffeted by the harsh waves of society. He faced failure within a short time and quit his job less than a year after starting. Can you believe it? Just a little scolding, and he quit his job, she said. I could never imagine it. Now he mostly stays in his room, hardly ever coming out, except for the bathroom or shower. We quit our jobs because Tony had started working. Hey, Dad, setting aside the inheritance issue, you have money, right? Can't you take care of us three, or even just us two? My grandfather's expression turned to astonishment at my father's words. Do you two only care about yourselves? He's still young. He'll figure something out. If it's decided that we stay here, he'll manage somehow. He's not a child anymore. We can't find new jobs at our age. Hey, Dad, listen to your loving son's request, my father said. My grandfather, dumbfounded, sighed and went back into the room. My mother looked at me intently. You should live with your mom and dad too, right? Oh, I forgot. You don't understand what we're talking about anyway, do you? All you need to do is nod along while saying yes. My mother's eyes were bloodshot. My father nodded in agreement. After thinking for a moment, I responded, Why do I have to live with strangers? We are your real parents. We raised you, my father said. When I lived with my parents as a child, I never felt like I was being cared for, I said. I barely existed. It was my grandparents and my teachers who truly raised me. I continued speaking to them, frozen in shock. You may be my parents by law, but I have no memory of that. I can't live with strangers. I look at you completely as strangers. If I was wrong, my grandparents would correct me. Their silence probably meant it was okay. My grandfather watched with a smile. My father looked at him. Don't you think that's a terrible thing to say, Dad? Say something. Indeed, if you want me to, I'll say something too. It's strange to say you raised Tracy when you abandoned her at 10. No, not about me. Say something to Tracy. Tracy, say something to your grandfather. Something? No, I mean, that's not it. You told me to say something, so I said something. My father began to flush with frustration. My grandfather started laughing, a chuckle that turned into a full-blown guffaw. Don't abandon us, hey Dad. My father pleaded. My grandfather waved his hand away and shouted in a low voice, Enough already. Why would you say such spoiled things now? At my grandfather's stern voice, my father and mother froze in place. During this pause, my grandmother hurried to the kitchen. When she returned, she had a large bag in her hand. This is perfect now. Get out, you bad luck, she said, throwing salt at my mother's face. Ouch! What is this? Salt? The bag my grandmother holds contains salt used for cooking. Parents who abandon their children are the epitome of bad luck, my grandmother said calmly, continuing to throw salt at my parents' faces. Go back already. I'll keep throwing salt until you leave. We have plenty of salt, so be prepared. Next to her, my grandfather stood holding a new bag. Leave, he shouted, forcefully throwing salt. The salt flew with force, hitting my parents directly in the face. Hey, Dad. Mom. Stop, please. Stop it already, my parents cried out. But my grandparents continued to throw salt, motionlessly shouting, Go back already. Never come back. My parents desperately clung to my hand. Are you going to abandon your parents? We're drowning in debt and struggling to live. Shouldn't family help us out? My family is only my grandparents, I responded. I forcefully shook off their wrinkled hands. My parents crumbled beside me. I took the bag from my grandmother and declared, This is goodbye forever. With that, I emptied the contents of the bag over my parents. That moment was decisive. My parents, disheartened, fled as if running away. As time passed, my brother appeared at our workshop. The debt collectors chasing my parents had left him behind when they fled the house at night. Soon, the debt collectors came to evict my brother, leaving him distraught. The police took him in, and as the only relatives they could contact, they reached out to my grandparents. One who does not work does not eat, my grandfather said. If you work hard and help out in the workshop, we'll provide a place to live and meals. What do you say? Surprisingly, my brother agreed immediately. His work in the workshop was still unpolished, and he was often scolded by my grandfather and other staff. But once he started showing talent in online sales and accounting, he became indispensable to the workshop. My brother, now a grown man, was ashamed of his past actions and now acknowledged and supported my abilities. It was still too early to say we had reconciled, but I found it both delightful and embarrassing that he was now treating me kindly again. Interestingly, just when my brother was getting accustomed to the workshop's work and starting to be acknowledged by everyone, our parents suddenly contacted him. Tony, where are you and what are you doing? It's getting dangerous here. At worst, we might end up on a fishing boat. Please help us. Ignoring any mention of my brother's well-being after they left him behind and focusing only on themselves, my brother completely lost his patience. He changed all his phone numbers and email addresses, cutting off any means of contact from our parents. I wondered if those two were working on the sea now. As a result, both my brother and I truly felt relieved to have escaped from those parents. The dinner table, surrounded by my grandparents, my brother, and me, might not have special dishes, but it felt warm and comforting. In a slightly misshapen dish made by my brother, there were mashed potatoes cooked by my grandmother. My grandfather enjoyed his beer in a glass I had made. I was finally feeling a happiness I couldn't experience in my childhood. Sometimes, one small thing can change everything, and that's exactly what happened to me, Kelly, just 3 weeks before my engagement party. I'm 30 and was thrilled about marrying Michael, my boyfriend of 5 years. We had been planning this party for months, and everything was going perfectly. But then, out of nowhere, my mom called. Kelly, cancel the engagement party, she demanded over the phone. I almost dropped my phone in shock. What? Mom, are you serious? I asked, hoping it was a joke. No joke, Lauren just got promoted, and we're celebrating on your engagement day, she replied. Lauren, my younger sister by 4 years, has always been the favorite of my parents. But this was a whole new level of craziness. Mom, come on. I've been planning this for so long. I'm not canceling just because Lauren got a promotion at work, I said, trying to stay calm. Don't be selfish, Kelly. This is a big deal for your sister. Same guests, different party, just reschedule, she insisted. I felt my anger rising. No way, Mom. This is my engagement we're talking about. I'm not canceling. End of story, I said firmly. She started yelling, her voice so high it hurt my ears. I didn't even bother to listen. I just hung up the phone. As I sat there, staring at my phone, memories from my childhood came rushing back. It was always like this: Lauren first, me second. I remembered my 18th birthday, which my parents had totally forgotten until Grandma called to wish me a happy birthday. They quickly threw together a sad celebration with a grocery store cake and a gift card. It was pathetic, especially compared to the big 5-day party they had thrown for Lauren's 15th, just a few months earlier. That's when Michael walked in. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. Kelly, what's going on? He asked, sitting down beside me. I told Michael everything: the call from my mom, her demands, and all the memories that came flooding back. He listened, and I could see him getting more upset with every word. That's ridiculous, he said when I finished. We're not canceling anything. I nodded, feeling so grateful for his support. I know, but why can't they ever put me first just once? I asked, feeling the frustration build. Because they're clueless, Michael said firmly. But I put you first, always. I looked up at him and managed a small smile. I know. That's why I'm marrying you, silly. We spent the rest of the night going over our plans, making sure everything was perfect. As I drifted off to sleep, I tried to push thoughts of my family out of my mind. This was my time, my moment, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. The next morning, I woke up determined to forget about my mom's crazy call and focus on the party. I had a million things to do: send invites, sort out decorations, you name it. Then my phone buzzed. It was my cousin Julie. Hey Kelly, everything okay with you and Michael? Heard you guys split up, she texted. I stared at my phone, totally confused. Where did she get that idea? I quickly typed back. What? No way, we're fine. Who told you that? Julie's reply came quickly. Weird. Aunt Olivia said your mom told her the engagement was off. My stomach dropped like a stone. I called Julie right away. What's going on? I asked as soon as she picked up. I don't know, Kelly. Aunt Olivia called last night and said your mom told her you and Michael had this huge fight and called everything off. She said we should all go to Lauren's promotion party instead. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Julie, that's all lies. We're still engaged and the party's still on. Mom wanted me to cancel for Lauren's thing, but I said no way. There was a pause. Oh no, Kelly, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I spent the next hour on the phone with Julie, trying to figure out what happened. Turns out, my mom had gone behind my back and called every single relative on the guest list, spinning a wild story about Michael and me breaking up and redirecting them all to Lauren's promotion party. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I'm going to fix this mess. Can you help spread the word that the engagement is still on? I asked. Of course, Julie replied without hesitation. I'll start calling people right now. After hanging up, I just sat on my couch, trying to wrap my head around it all. My own mother had tried to sabotage my engagement party. It was almost too crazy to believe. Michael found me there an hour later when he got home from work. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. I told Michael everything about Mom's calls, the lies, and how she redirected everyone to Lauren's party. With each word, I could see the anger growing in his eyes. That's it, he said when I finished. We're cutting them off, all of them. Your parents, Lauren, the whole bunch. I knew he was right, but the idea of cutting off my family scared me. Even though they treated me poorly, they were still my family. Let's focus on fixing this first, I said. We need to let everyone know the engagement is still on. Michael nodded, determined. Okay, where do we start? We spent the rest of the night doing damage control, sending emails, making calls, and posting on social media. I wrote a long message explaining everything and sent it to everyone on our guest list. It was exhausting and humiliating, having to explain over and over that no, Michael and I hadn't broken up, and yes, the engagement party was still happening. By the time we finished, it was way past midnight. My voice was hoarse from all the talking, and my eyes burned from staring at screens. We did it, Michael said, pulling me into a hug. It's going to be okay. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Mom's betrayal had opened up old wounds, all the times I'd been overlooked, all the times Lauren had been the favorite. It all came rushing back. The next day, I decided to visit Aunt Nicole. She's my dad's sister and has always been pretty nice to me. I figured I'd invite her to the engagement party in person and clear up any confusion. When I got to her place, I heard voices coming from the living room. I was about to call out a greeting when I overheard something that made me stop in my tracks. I can't believe Kelly would do such a thing, Aunt Nicole was saying. Canceling her own engagement party just to spite her sister. So childish. My heart sank. It was another lie, spread by my own family, to cover up the first one. I was about to burst in and set the record straight when I heard another voice chime in. I know, right? Poor Lauren must be devastated. After all that hard work to get promoted, and now Kelly is trying to steal her thunder. I recognized that voice. It was my cousin Maria. I always thought we were close, but there she was, gossiping about me behind my back. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the room and asked, "Is that really what you think of me?" Both women jumped like they'd seen a ghost. Aunt Nicole was the first to recover, quickly putting on a fake smile. "Kelly, sweetie, we didn't hear you come in." "Obviously," I replied, my voice cold. "I came to invite you to my engagement party, but it seems like you've already made up your minds about me." Maria at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "Kelly, we didn't mean." "Save it." I cut her off. "I want to know exactly what Mom told you." For the next hour, I listened as they revealed everything about Mom's twisted story. According to her, I had a tantrum when I heard about Lauren's promotion and demanded she reschedule her celebration. When Lauren refused, I supposedly canceled my own engagement party out of spite, saying I'd rather not get married at all than share the spotlight. It was just another lie from my family. By the time they finished, I was trembling with anger. "None of that is true," I said, my voice shaking. "Mom called me and demanded I cancel my engagement party for Lauren's celebration. I said no, and now she's spreading lies to sabotage me." I told them everything: the forgotten birthdays, the constant comparisons, years of feeling like I was never good enough. By the time I finished, both women were in tears. "Oh, Kelly," Aunt Nicole said, reaching for my hand. "We had no idea. We should have known better than to believe such crazy stories." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Look, I appreciate the apology, but right now I need your help. The engagement party is still on, and I need you to spread the word."
Can you do that?
They both nodded eagerly, relieved to have a chance to make things right. As I left Aunt Nicole's house, I felt all mixed up, angry at Mom's betrayal, hurt that my family so easily believed the worst about me, but also a bit hopeful. At least some of the truth was out now. The big day arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. As Michael and I walked up to the hall, I held my breath as we pushed open the doors, bracing myself for whatever mess we might find inside. But holy cow, I couldn't believe my eyes. The place was buzzing with people. Smiling faces turned to greet us, and a warm, fuzzy feeling washed over me. The room was packed with relatives, not just the ones we had managed to reach the day before, but faces I hadn't seen in ages. "I can't believe you all came," I said, my voice choked up. Uncle Paul, my dad's brother, came up and gave Michael a hearty slap on the back. "Of course we came. Did you really think we'd miss this?" "I've got to say, those rumors about your canceled engagement spread like wildfire, but it looks like they backfired big time," someone said. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "I guess they did." As Michael and I made our way through the crowd, soaking up all the congratulations and well wishes, I couldn't help but notice that Mom, Dad, and Lauren were nowhere to be seen. No texts, no emails, not even a reluctant congratulations. But surprisingly, their absence felt more like a relief than a disappointment. Instead, I found myself drawn to Michael's parents, who were beaming at us with genuine pride and love. His mom hugged me tight and whispered, "We're so proud of you, Kelly. You're already part of our family." The party was in full swing when suddenly there was a commotion near the dance floor. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was my 83-year-old grandma in the middle, showing off what she called an incendiary dance from her youth. "Come on, you young ones," she called out, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "Let me show you how we used to dance back in my day." The crowd went wild as Grandma twirled and swayed, moving surprisingly well for her age. Soon, others joined in, and the dance floor turned into an amazing multi-generational dance-off. As I mingled with the guests, I couldn't help but overhear bits of gossip about all the family drama leading up to today. "Can you believe what Kelly's mother tried to do?" I heard Cousin Maria say to another relative. "She tried to cancel her own daughter's engagement party for her other daughter's work thing. It's nuts." "I know," the other voice replied. "Poor Kelly has always gotten the short end of the stick in that family. I'm glad she's finally standing up for herself." Instead of feeling embarrassed or upset by these conversations, I felt validated. For once, my relatives were seeing the truth about my family dynamics, and they were on my side. As the night went on, I found myself feeling truly happy and celebrated, maybe for the first time ever. The absence of my immediate family, which I had been so worried about, instead felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The day after our amazing engagement party, Michael and I were relaxing on the couch, reliving the awesome moments from the night before when my phone rang. My stomach flipped when I saw it was Mom calling. Against my better judgment, I answered the call. "Hello. You ungrateful, nasty girl." Mom's voice screeched through the phone. "How dare you?" I held the phone away from my ear, her angry rant loud even from a distance. Michael looked at me, concerned, but I shook my head, signaling that I'd handle it. "Mom, what?" "Don't you mom me," she cut me off. "You've humiliated your sister. Only 5 people showed up to her party and they were just those nosy old aunts who'd go to anything." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm sorry you're disappointed, but..." "Disappointed?" "Lauren is crushed. She cried all night. This was supposed to be her moment, and you ruined it with your selfishness." I felt my patience slipping. "Mom, I've been planning my engagement party for months. Lauren's promotion party was a last-minute thing, and she knew it clashed with my engagement. That's no excuse. Family comes first, Kelly, but clearly you don't understand that." Before I could respond, she hung up on me. Immediately after the call, my phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "Hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I'll make you pay for this humiliation." I showed the message to Michael, who frowned. "She can't be serious." The next 3 weeks were quiet, and I started to think maybe the storm had passed. But then, one afternoon, there was an unexpected knock at our door. I opened it to find Michael's parents standing there, looking worried. Mr. and Mrs. Adam. What a surprise. Is everything okay? I asked. They exchanged a glance before Mrs. Adams spoke. Kelly, dear, can we come in? We need to talk to you about something. My heart sank as I led them to the living room. Once we were all seated, Mr. Adam cleared his throat. Kelly, well, we've heard some troubling rumors. There's been talk that you've been cheating on Michael. I felt like I'd been slapped.
What?
That's ridiculous. I would never. We know, dear, Mrs. Adam interrupted gently. We've known you for years. We don't believe it for a second. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by anger as I realized where these rumors likely came from. It's my sister, I said, my voice shaking a bit. She threatened to get back at me for ruining her promotion party. She must be spreading these lies. Mr. Adam nodded grimly. We figured as much. We wanted to come to you directly rather than let these rumors spread. As they left, they promised to help squash any rumors they heard. I felt all mixed up inside. I was touched by the Adams' support and trust in me, but I was also furious at Lauren. How could she sink so low? A few days after the drama with Michael's parents, I got a call from Grandma. Her voice, usually so cheery, sounded worried. Kelly, sweetie, she started, I've heard about all this mess with your parents and Lauren. Don't you think it's time to bury the hatchet? I sighed, feeling the weight of her expectations. Grandma, it's not that easy. They've really hurt me. I know, honey, but they're family. Surely there's a way to patch things up. I could hear the plea in her voice, and it tugged at my heartstrings. Grandma had always been there for me, even when the rest of my family wasn't. I hated disappointing her. What do you think I should do? I asked, already dreading the answer. Why don't you try reaching out? Make a peace offering. Show them you're willing to mend fences. I closed my eyes, torn between my love for Grandma and my need to protect myself. After a long moment, I sighed. Okay, Grandma, I'll try for you. That evening, I stood on my parents' doorstep, heart pounding. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't going to go well. Lauren was there, her face full of anger. So, she spat, you think you can just waltz in here and throw me a pity party? That's not what I started, but she cut me off. I don't need your handouts, Kelly. Do you think that makes up for what you did? I should have had my party on your day, then people would have actually shown up. I stared at her, shocked by the bitterness in her voice. Lauren, I'm trying to make things right. Make things right, she screeched. You ruined everything. As usual, it's all about you. I looked to my parents, hoping for some support, but they just stood there, nodding along with Lauren. She's right, Kelly, Mom said. You've always been so selfish.
I felt something snap inside me.
Without a word, I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls behind me. Later, I visited my grandma again. She greeted me with a hopeful smile. How did it go, dear? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone. Grandma, I think you need to hear this. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she nodded. I hit play, and Lauren's furious voice filled the room. As the recording played, I watched Grandma's face change from hope to shock, then to deep disappointment. When it finished, there was a long silence. Then, to my surprise, Grandma reached out and took my hand. Oh, Kelly, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad. I owe you an apology, Grandma said. I shouldn't have pushed you to reconcile. I felt tears well up in my eyes. It's okay, Grandma. You didn't know. She shook her head. No, it's not okay. I should have believed you from the start. I just wanted so badly for our family to be whole. We sat in silence for a while, both thinking about what had happened. Finally, Grandma spoke again. Kelly, dear, I want you to know something. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and support. And from what I've seen and heard, Michael and his family give you that. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing your own happiness. The morning after my heart-to-heart with Grandma, I woke up to my phone buzzing like crazy. It was a flood of angry texts from my parents. My heart sank as I read them, realizing Grandma must have told them about the recording. "How dare you record our private conversations?" Mom's message screamed, "You're nothing but a sneaky, ungrateful snitch." Dad's message was just as bad. "I can't believe you'd stoop so low as to secretly record us and then play it for your grandmother. You've betrayed this family for the last time." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Even with proof of their behavior, they still managed to make me the bad guy. This was the last straw. I was done with my toxic family. In the weeks that followed, I tried to focus on work and my life with Michael, but Lauren had other plans. Her spitefulness went into overdrive as she started harassing me. It began with whispers at work. Colleagues would go silent when I walked into a room, only to start whispering again as soon as I left. I soon found out Lauren had been spreading nasty rumors about me, from calling me incompetent to telling outright lies about my personal life. Then came the anonymous messages on social media. Hateful comments popped up on my posts, each one nastier than the last. I couldn't prove it was Lauren, but the tone and content left little doubt in my mind. But Lauren's cruelty reached a new low when she tried to contact Michael. One evening, he came home looking troubled. "Kelly, I got a weird call today," he said. "It was Lauren. She tried to tell me you were cheating on me." I felt the blood drain from my face.
What?
"Michael, you know that's not true." He quickly reassured me. "Of course, I know that." I shut her down right away. "But Kelly, this is getting out of hand." I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. "I know. I just don't know how to make it stop." I didn't have to do much. Lauren's obsession with revenge started to backfire on her. She became so focused on trying to make my life miserable that her work began to suffer. She spent more and more time plotting against me, and her coworkers noticed. They saw her constantly whispering and spending long stretches on her phone instead of doing her job. It wasn't long before her bosses noticed too. I heard through the office grapevine that Lauren received an official warning for her poor performance. But even that didn't seem to slow her down. Then, about a month into her harassment campaign, the news broke Lauren had been demoted. The irony was clear to everyone. The promotion she had been so desperate to celebrate, the one that had started this whole mess, was now taken away. After the drama with Lauren finally settled down, I threw myself into wedding planning like it was my full-time job. We finally picked a beautiful outdoor venue, a fairy tale garden with a charming gazebo where we'd say our idos. As we stood there, imagining our big day, Michael gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, feeling all warm and fuzzy inside. "Happier than I've ever been," I replied, and I truly meant it. With the venue set, we moved on to choosing our wedding party. I asked my closest friends, the ones who had stuck by me through all the craziness, to be my bridesmaids. They all said yes, which made me even more excited. Then came the guest list. I sat at our dining table, addressing envelopes to all the relatives and friends who had supported us during the past few chaotic months. As I wrote each name, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for these people who had shown me what real family is all about. But when I got to the bottom of my list, I paused. There were 3 names I hadn't written: Mom, Dad, and Lauren. I stared at those blank spaces, feeling a swirl of emotions inside me. Michael found me there, staring at the paper. "Are you okay?" he asked, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. I looked up at him, tears in my eyes. "I don't think I can invite them, Michael. Not after everything that's happened." He nodded, understanding. "It's your call, Kelly. Whatever you decide, I've got your back." I took a deep breath and put down the pen. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "They don't deserve to be there. This day is about celebrating love and support, and that's not something they've shown me." As I made that decision, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This wedding was about starting a new chapter, surrounded by people who truly cared about us. And I knew that, with Michael by my side, I was making the right choice. As I said the words, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing that cutting ties with my toxic family was the right decision for my future. There was sadness, of course, but it was mixed with an overwhelming sense of relief. The weeks flew by, and before I knew it, our wedding day had arrived. Standing in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, adjusting my veil, I was suddenly filled with a peace I hadn't felt in years. As I walked down the aisle toward Michael, I saw the faces of the people who had supported us. Michael's parents were beaming with pride, my grandma was dabbing at her eyes with a hanky, and our friends and relatives who had stood by us, despite all the family drama, were smiling warmly. These were my people, the ones who had shown me what real love and support looked like. When I reached Michael, he took my hands in his eyes shining with love. As we said our vows, I felt a deep sense of rightness settle over me. This was where I belonged. At the reception, surrounded by laughter and joy, I had a big realization. My engagement party all those months ago wasn't just about celebrating our upcoming marriage. It was the first day of my new life, a life where I wasn't an outsider anymore, but the creator of my own happiness. As Michael and I swayed to our first dance as husband and wife, I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling truly at peace. The journey had been tough, no doubt, but it had led me here to a place of strength, wisdom, and genuine happiness. "I love you," Michael whispered in my ear. "I love you too," I replied, my heart swelling with emotion. In that moment, I knew that whatever life threw our way, we'd face it together. And for the first time in my life, I was excited about the future, not scared of it. This was my fresh start, and I was ready to dive in headfirst with Michael by my side.
My name's Isabella, and I'm 21 years old. I just finished my third year at art college, and let me tell you, it's been one hell of a ride. But before I get into all that, you need to know where I come from. I grew up in a house where I never felt at home. My parents, Tom and Sarah, always made it clear that my older sister, Emily, was their golden child. She's 4 years older than me and has always been a thorn in my side. From the day I was born, Emily seemed to hate me. She'd tease me, break my toys, and make my life miserable. And my parents? They'd just laugh it off, saying, "Oh, that's just how sisters are." But it wasn't normal. I remember when I was 14, I had this huge crush on a boy at school. His name was Jake, and I thought he was the cutest thing ever. I'd spend hours drawing portraits of him in secret, hiding them under my mattress where I thought no one would find them. But Emily found them. And you know what she did? She pinned them up on the school bulletin board for everyone to see. I still remember walking into school that day. The laughter, the pointing, the whispers. It felt like the whole world was crashing down around me. And Jake? He came up to me, all awkward and stuttering. Isabella. I saw the drawings. Look, you're nice and all, but I don't like you that way." I ran home crying that day. My parents were in the kitchen when I burst through the door, tears streaming down my face. "Mom, Dad, Emily humiliated me at school. She found my private drawings in." But before I could finish, Emily waltzed in, a smug grin on her face. "Oh, come on, Izzy," she said, using the nickname I hated. "It was just a bit of fun. Not my fault you can't take a joke." And you know what my parents did? They laughed. They actually laughed. "Sweetie," my mom said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes, "you really need to toughen up. It's not Emily's fault you're such a crybaby." That's why, when I got accepted into art college, I was over the moon. It was my ticket out of that house, away from the constant mockery and belittlement. My grandmother was the only one who ever showed me any real love. She was the one who encouraged my art, who told me I had talent. When I got accepted, she insisted on paying for my tuition. "Isabella," she said, her eyes twinkling, "you've got a gift. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'll make sure you get the education you deserve." For 3 years, she paid for everything. My tuition, my supplies, even some extra for living expenses. But then, just before my final year, she got sick. I remember sitting by her bedside, holding her frail hand. She looked at me with those kind eyes of hers and said, Isabella, my dear, I'm so proud of you. You're going to do great things." Then she turned to my parents, who were standing at the foot of the bed. "Tom, Sarah, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll pay for Isabella's final year. She needs to finish her education." My parents nodded solemnly. "Of course, Mom," my dad said. "We promise." Grandma died a week later. At the reading of her will, we found out she'd left her house to my parents and her jewelry to Emily and me. Emily, of course, immediately grabbed the diamond tiara. "I'll take this," she announced. "Isabella can have the ring. She doesn't care about jewelry anyway, right, Izzy?" I didn't argue. She was right, I didn't care much for jewelry. So I took the diamond ring and put it in a safety deposit box at the bank. I made friends quickly in college. There was Zoe, a punk rocker with a talent for abstract art, and Marcus, a quiet guy who could make sculptures that took your breath away. They didn't care about my family drama. To them, I was just Isabella, the girl who could paint like nobody's business. "Hey, Bella," Zoe said one day, using the nickname I actually liked. "There's a tattoo parlor downtown looking for someone to draw designs. You should apply." I was hesitant at first. My parents would flip if they knew I was working in a tattoo parlor. But then I thought, why should I care what they think? So I applied, and to my surprise, I got the job. The owner, a burly guy named Mike with more ink than skin, took one look at my portfolio and said, "You're hired, kid." For the first time in my life, I was earning my own money. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't tell my parents or Emily about it. I could already hear Emily's mocking voice. "Oh, little Izzy's drawing pictures for thugs now? How cute." College life suited me. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my grandmother proud. My professors praised my work, and I even won a few small competitions. But more importantly, I was happy. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was finishing up my third year. As the summer break approached, a familiar dread settled in my stomach. I had to go home. I opened the door and stepped into chaos. The living room was full of people, all bustling about with excitement. In the center of it all stood Emily, beaming as she held up a white dress. My mother noticed me first. "Oh, Isabella," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "You're home. We weren't expecting you so soon." I stood there, stunned. "Emily's getting married? When did this happen?" Emily turned to me, her smile turning into a smirk. "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? I guess we've all been so busy with the preparations, it must have slipped our minds." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My own sister was getting married, and no one had even bothered to tell me. "Who's the lucky guy?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Richard," Emily said, pulling forward a tall, handsome man I hadn't noticed before. "Isn't he dreamy?" Richard gave me a polite smile and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Isabella. I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, wondering what exactly he'd heard. Knowing Emily, probably nothing good. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of excited chatter downstairs. Emily was holding court at the breakfast table, surrounded by our parents and a couple of her bridesmaids. As I listened to their conversation, I learned that Emily had broken up with her previous boyfriend at our parents' insistence. Apparently, he'd been mixed up with some dangerous crowd. "Thank God you listened to us, sweetie," Mom said, patting Emily's hand. "Richard is such a better match for you. And his family is so well off." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Of course, that's what they cared about. "Speaking of Richard," Emily said, turning to me with a smirk, "he's taking me out to dinner tonight. Not that you'd know anything about that, right, Izzy? Still haven't found a boyfriend?" They all laughed, and I gripped my coffee mug tighter, willing myself not to cry. Some things never change. As the days passed, I tried to stay out of everyone's way. I spent most of my time in my room, sketching and counting down the days until I could leave. But one evening, I couldn't avoid the family dinner. We were all seated around the table when Emily dropped her bombshell. "I've decided to wear Grandma's tiara for the wedding," she announced. "It'll look perfect with my dress." "Oh, that's a wonderful idea," Mom exclaimed. Emily wasn't done. "But you know what would make it even better? If I had a matching piece to go with it. Like, oh, I don't know, a ring?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I knew exactly where this was going. Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's right. Isabella, didn't Grandma leave you a ring?" I nodded slowly, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. "Well, there you go," Emily said, clapping her hands together. "Izzy, you'll let me borrow the ring for the wedding, won't you?" I put down my fork. "Borrow? For how long?" Emily laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, silly Izzy. I mean, you'll give it to me. For keeps." But Grandma left that to me," I protested weakly. "Come on, Isabella," Dad said, his voice stern. "Don't be selfish. It's your sister's wedding day." I looked around the table, hoping to see someone, anyone, on my side. But all I saw were expectant faces, waiting for me to give in. Like always. "Isabella," Dad said, his voice cold. "Either you give the ring to your sister, or we won't pay for your final year of college." The room fell silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But you promised Grandma," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Emily let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, please. No one cares about promises made to some half-witted old woman." I stood up so fast, my chair fell over. "How dare you talk about Grandma like that?" I shouted. "That's enough," Dad roared. "Isabella, you have a choice to make. The ring or your education. Decide." I looked at their faces, Dad's anger, Mom's disappointment, Emily's smug satisfaction. In that moment, I knew I had lost. Again. With shaking hands, I took off the necklace where I kept the key to my safety deposit box. I handed it to Emily. The morning after the ring incident, I cornered Emily in the kitchen. "When exactly is your wedding?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily looked up from her coffee, a sly smile playing on her lips. "It's on the 29th. "Why, planning to ruin it?" I ignored her jab. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to get away from this toxic environment. "No," I replied coolly. "I'm going to visit a friend from college. I'll be back in time for the wedding." I packed my bags and left that afternoon, heading to my friend Zoe's place in the next city over. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Zoe and I spent the week exploring art galleries, hitting up local cafes, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed. But my moment of peace was shattered exactly 1 week later. I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw it, photos of Emily's wedding. My sister, resplendent in white, the diamond tiara glittering on her head, and my ring sparkling on her finger. The caption read, "Just married. Off to the Maldives with my hunky husband." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. "Why didn't you invite me to the wedding?" "Emily told me the wrong date." There was a long pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line. "Isabella, your sister, she didn't want you there. She said you'd ruin her perfect day. We thought it was best not to tell you." I felt like I was going to be sick. "How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter too." "Don't be dramatic," Mom chimed in. "It's not like you really wanted to be there anyway, right?" I hung up, my whole body shaking with anger and hurt. A few days later, I returned home, only to find Emily had also returned from her honeymoon. I walked into the living room to find her, Mom, and Dad huddled together, looking at apartment listings. I cleared my throat, and they all looked up. "Don't forget about my tuition," I said, my voice small. You promised to pay for my last year if I gave Emily the ring. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Actually, Isabella, we've decided to use that money as a down payment on Emily's apartment instead. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. But you promised. You swore to Grandma. Plans change, Mom said dismissively. Emily needs it more. I'm sure you can figure something out. Emily was still laughing, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood boil. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at her, grabbing a fistful of her hair. Emily screeched, and suddenly everyone was shouting. Dad yanked me away, his face red with anger. That's enough, he roared. Isabella, get out of this house right now. I ran to my room, threw some clothes in a bag, and stormed out, slamming the front door behind me. As I walked away from the house, my heart pounding and my cheeks wet with tears, I realized something. I found myself back at Zoe's place, feeling lost and broken. For days, I barely left her guest room, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the walls. Zoe tried her best to comfort me, but I was inconsolable. A week passed in this haze of despair. Then, one morning, as I listlessly checked my emails, I saw a message that made my heart stop. Congratulations! You are the winner of the annual art school competition. Your prize includes a full scholarship for your final year of studies. I read the email 3 times, not believing my eyes. Then I let out a scream that brought Zoe running. I thrust my phone at her, happy tears streaming down my face. I won. I won a scholarship. I can finish school. Zoe's eyes widened as she read the email, then she pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. Oh my God, Bella! This is amazing! For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I could finish my degree without my parents' help. I could make my own way. When the new semester started, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. Between my classes and my part-time job at the tattoo parlor, I barely had time to think about my family drama. Months passed, and I slowly started to heal. One day, I was hanging out with my classmate, Jake, who worked part-time at a local pawn shop. We were chatting about our day when he mentioned something that caught my attention. You won't believe what happened during my shift today, he said. This girl came in with the most beautiful diamond necklace and ring I've ever seen. Must have been worth a fortune. My heart skipped a beat. What did she look like? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jake described a woman who sounded exactly like Emily. Can you draw the jewelry for me? I asked, my hands shaking slightly. Jake looked confused, but complied. As I watched him sketch, my suspicions were confirmed. The necklace was the one Emily had always bragged about, and the ring, it was my grandmother's ring. Jake, I said, my mouth dry, is there any way you could get me the security footage from the pawn shop? Jake must have seen the desperation in my eyes because he finally nodded. Okay, I'll see what I can do. A few days later, Jake handed me a USB drive. Here, he said. But you didn't get this from me, okay? I nodded gratefully and rushed back to my dorm room. With trembling hands, I plugged in the drive and opened the video file. There was Emily, clear as day, handing over the jewelry. But what made my jaw drop was what happened next. As she turned to leave, a man entered the frame. Emily threw her arms around him, kissing him passionately. It wasn't Richard. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. As the man turned slightly, I gasped. I recognized him. It was Emily's ex-boyfriend, the one our parents had made her break up with because of his criminal connections. I sat back, my mind reeling. Emily had pawned her precious jewelry, including my grandmother's ring, and was apparently cheating on her husband with her criminal ex-boyfriend. Part of me wanted to immediately send this video to my parents, to Richard, to everyone who had ever believed Emily's lies. But another part of me hesitated. This was big. Too big to act on impulsively. Months passed, and I thought I'd put my family drama behind me. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. Isabella, darling, I have wonderful news, she chirped, her voice bubbling with excitement. Your sister is pregnant. Can you believe it? They're having a big announcement party next week. Isn't it exciting? My heart sank. Of course, another family event I hadn't been invited to. That's great, Aunt Lisa. Thanks for letting me know. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue cutting ties with my toxic family. But another part of me, the part that still held on to the video from the pawnshop, knew this might be my chance. A week later, I found myself standing outside my parents' house. Cars lined the street, and I could hear laughter and chatter from inside. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Mom opened the door, her smile instantly fading when she saw me. Isabella? What are you doing here? Pushing past her, I walked into the living room. The chatter died down as people noticed me. Emily, standing in the center of the room with Richard, looked like she'd seen a ghost. What is she doing here? Emily hissed. Dad's voice boomed through the room. Isabella, get out of this house immediately. You're not welcome here. Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. I saw Richard's parents exchange worried glances. Mom, always one for saving face, plastered on a fake smile. I'm so sorry, everyone. We've had to distance ourselves from Isabella. She's become quite greedy and unworthy of our family name. The room erupted into arguments. Some relatives defended me, while others sided with my parents. I raised my voice. I have something to say. Gradually, the room quieted down. All eyes were on me. I turned to Emily. Congratulations on your pregnancy, sis. But I have to ask, why aren't you wearing Grandma's tiara and ring? Emily's face went pale. Her mother-in-law spoke up, now that you mention it, I haven't seen that beautiful ring in a while. Emily, dear, where is it? Emily stuttered, I sent them for restoration. They needed cleaning. I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone. That's interesting. Because I have a video here that tells a different story. The color drained from Emily's face as I connected my phone to the TV. The security footage from the pawnshop began to play. There was Emily, clear as day, pawning the jewelry. And then, the moment that made everyone in the room gasp, Emily, throwing herself into the arms of a man who was definitely not Richard, kissing him passionately. The moment the video ended, chaos erupted in the living room. Richard's face contorted with rage and pain as he turned to Emily. Emily, what is this? Who is that man? He shouted, his voice cracking. Emily burst into tears, mascara streaming down her face. I can explain. Richard's mother stepped forward, her voice ice cold. I think we all deserve an explanation, Emily. Richard's father, a stern-looking man, spoke up. I think we need a paternity test. Immediately. As accusations flew and tempers flared, I quietly slipped out of the house. I had done what I came to do. The truth was out, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Emily's deception came to light. Through the family grapevine, I learned that she had been secretly meeting her ex-boyfriend, the one with criminal connections, behind Richard's back. She had been spending Richard's money on him and even pawned her jewelry to pay off his debts. The paternity test results were the final nail in the coffin. The baby wasn't Richard's, it was her ex-boyfriend's. Richard, understandably devastated, filed for divorce. He sued Emily for a substantial sum, citing emotional damages and financial fraud. Her ex-boyfriend, upon learning of the pregnancy, vanished without a trace, leaving Emily to face the consequences alone. My parents, who had always put Emily on a pedestal, were forced to face the harsh reality of her actions. They had to take out a significant loan to help Emily pay the compensation Richard demanded. Their golden child had fallen from grace, and they were left to pick up the pieces. In a twisted turn of events, they tried to blame me for everything. Mom left a voicemail on my phone, her voice bitter and accusing. Are you happy now, Isabella? you've ruined your sister's life. I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted the message without responding. Their words no longer had the power to hurt me. As for me, I returned to college, threw myself into my studies, and focused on building the life I wanted. I cut off all communication with my family, changing my phone number and email address. The toxic cycle was finally broken. It's been 2 years since that fateful day when I exposed Emily's lies. I graduated from art college with honors, my final project earning praise from both professors and local art critics. Now, at 23, I'm working at the Harmony Art Gallery in the city. It's a dream come true, surrounded by beautiful artwork every day, helping to curate exhibitions, and even organizing events for up-and-coming artists. But that's not all. I've been painting in my free time, and to my surprise and delight, my work has caught the eye of several collectors. I haven't forgotten my roots, though. I still create tattoo sketches in my spare time. It's become a cherished hobby, a link to the past that reminds me of how far I've come. Some of my designs have even been featured in tattoo magazines, which never fails to make me smile. As for my family, well, that's a complicated story. I've maintained relationships with a few aunts and cousins who stood by me during the fallout. They keep me updated on the family drama, though I try not to let it affect me anymore. From what I hear, Emily is still living with our parents. She's unemployed, struggling to raise her child alone. Mom and Dad, facing financial troubles of their own, are constantly pressuring her to find a job and move out. The arguments are frequent and bitter, I'm told. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emily since that day. They tried reaching out a few times in the beginning, guilt-tripping messages, angry voicemails, but I stood firm in my decision to cut ties. Eventually, they stopped trying. On a brighter note, I've been dating a wonderful guy named Alex for the past year. He's a graphic designer I met at a gallery event. He's kind, supportive, and best of all, he understands my passion for art. We're talking about moving in together soon, another step towards building the life I want. Welcome to the Retaliation Realm channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. Get out of my house, you crazy, expletive. Jake's words echo in my mind as I sit on the curb, tears streaming down my face. I can still feel the sting of his hands shoving me to the floor, and the coldness in his eyes as he threw me out like garbage. This is what my 57th birthday has come to, my son treating me like I'm nothing, like I haven't spent my entire life loving him, raising him, sacrificing for him. And now, because of that wretched wife of his, he can't even stand the sight of me. Amber. Even her name makes my blood boil. From the moment Jake brought her home, I knew she was in trouble. The way she looked at me like I was just an obstacle in her path. The way she whispered in Jake's ear, turning him against me, little by little. I warned him not to marry her and begged him to see through her manipulations, but he was blinded by lust, by the idea that she loved him unconditionally. Ha! The only thing that a woman loves is herself. And now, because of her, I've lost everything, my son, my grandchildren, the family I've dedicated my life to, cast aside like yesterday's trash. As I sit there wallowing, a car pulls up beside me. The window rolls down, revealing the concerned face of my best friend. Maggie, Diane, what happened? What are you doing out here? She asks, her voice laced with worry. I can barely choke out the words. Jake, he kicked me out. Said I was a crazy expletive and that it was his house now. Maggie's eyes widen in shock, then narrow in anger. He did what on your birthday? Oh, honey, get in the car. You're coming home with me. I climb into the passenger seat, my body numb as Maggie drives. She keeps glancing over at me, her brow furrowed. This is unacceptable, Diane. Jake can't treat you like this. Something has to be done. I shake my head sadly. What can I do, Mags? He's a grown man. He's made his choice. Maggie purses her lips, a determined glint in her eye. Maybe so, but that doesn't mean he gets to get away with it. You're his mother, for God's sake. It's time Jake and that wicked wife of his learned that there are consequences for their actions. I turned to her, confused. What are you saying? A slow smile spreads across Maggie's face. I'm saying, my dear, that it's time for a little revenge. And I know just the person to help us get it. As we speed into the night, I feel a flicker of something I haven't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I can make Jake and Amber pay for the pain they've caused. Maybe karma will finally catch up to them. The day started well enough. It was my birthday, and despite everything that had happened with Jake, I was determined to make the most of it. I spent the morning tidying up the house, putting up a few decorations, and preparing a special dinner. I even bought a cake from the bakery down the street, the one Jake always loved as a kid. Around noon, I called Jake, my heart fluttering with a mix of hope and apprehension. To my surprise, he answered. Hey Mom, what's up? His tone was neutral and guarded. I took a deep breath. Well, I was wondering if you, Amber, and the kids would like to come over for dinner tonight. It's my birthday, and I thought it would be nice to spend some time together as a family. There was a long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background like he was discussing it with someone. Finally, he spoke. Yeah, okay, we can do that. Relief washed over me. How about 6 p.m.? I'm making your favorite lasagna. Sure, see you then. He hung up before I could say anything else. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, everything was perfect. The lasagna was bubbling in the oven, the table was set, and the cake was proudly displayed on the counter. Right on time, the doorbell rang. I practically ran to answer it, a huge smile on my face. But the moment I opened the door, my heart sank. Jake stood there, a scowl etched on his features. Beside him was Amber, her lips curled into a sneer. The kids were nowhere to be seen. Where are the children? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Amber let out a harsh laugh. We decided it was best they didn't come. Wouldn't want them exposed to any more of your toxic influence. I felt like I'd been slapped. Toxic influence? What are you talking about? She stepped forward, jabbing a finger at me. Don't play dumb, Diane. We all know what a terrible mother you were, the way you turned Jake against his father, the constant guilt-tripping and manipulation. It's no wonder he wants nothing to do with you. Tears stung my eyes. I looked to Jake, silently pleading for him to defend me, but he just stood there, arms crossed, saying nothing. That's not true, I managed to choke out. I've always loved and supported Jake. I would never do anything to hurt him. Amber's eyes flashed with malice. Save the martyr act. You're nothing but a selfish, vindictive woman who can't stand the fact that Jake has moved on with his life, that he chose me over you. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged forward, ready to slap that smug look off her face, but Jake stepped between us, grabbing my wrist in a painful grip. Don't you dare touch my wife, he growled. You're pathetic, you know that? Coming up with this whole birthday charade, trying to worm your way back in. Well, it's not going to work. We're done with you. With that, he shoved me backward, sending me stumbling. I caught myself on the door frame, tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. Jake, please, I whispered. I'm your mother. But he just shook his head, his eyes cold. Not anymore. Come on, Amber, let's go. I watched helplessly as they turned and walked away, slamming the door behind them. The sound echoed through the empty house, a brutal finality to it. And there I stood, alone on my birthday, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the aftermath of Jake and Amber's cruelty, minutes, hours, it all blurred together. The pain in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt before, a deep, aching void that threatened to swallow me whole. Eventually, I managed to close the door, my hands shaking. I stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto the cushions as sobs racked my body. How could he do this to me? My son treated me like I was nothing, like I hadn't spent my entire life loving and caring for him. The sound of my phone ringing jolted me out of my despair. I glanced at the screen, seeing Maggie's name. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, not wanting to burden her with my problems, but the thought of facing this alone was too much to bear. I answered, my voice thick with tears. Hello? Diane, what's wrong? Did something happen with Jake? The concern in Maggie's voice was immediate. I broke down, the whole sordid story spilling out between gasps and sobs. Maggie listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. That's it, she said firmly when I finished. This has gone too far. Jake and Amber can't keep treating you like this. It's time for them to face some consequences. I sniffled, wiping my eyes. What do you mean? I mean it's time for a little payback. They think they can just walk all over you, but they've got another thing coming. You're a strong woman, Diane. It's time to start acting like it. Her words ignited a spark within me, a flicker of anger amidst the pain. She was right. I couldn't just sit here and wallow. I needed to do something to take back control. Okay, I said, my voice steadier now. What did you have in mind? I could practically hear Maggie's grin through the phone. Meet me at the diner in an hour. I've got someone I want you to meet. Trust me, he's going to be a big help. An hour later, I was sitting across from Maggie in a booth at the local diner. She had a mischievous glint in her eye as she sipped her coffee. So, who is this mystery person? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. As if on cue, the bell above the door jingled. Maggie waved at someone behind me. There he is. I turned, my eyes widening as a tall, broad-shouldered man approached our table. He had a rugged, no-nonsense look about him, like someone who had seen his fair share of trouble. Diane, meet my brother Carlos, Maggie said, gesturing for him to sit. Carlos nodded at me, his gaze assessing. Maggie filled me in on your situation. I'm sorry to hear about what your son and his wife did. That's rough. I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant even as the pain twisted in my gut. It is what it is. But Maggie seems to think you can help. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. I can. See, in my line of work, I've learned that everyone has secrets, skeletons in their closet. And from what Maggie's told me, I'm betting your daughter-in-law has more than a few. A tingle of anticipation ran down my spine. What are you saying? Carlos smiled, slow and dangerous. I'm saying, let me dig into Amber's past. If there's dirt to be found, I'll find it. And once we have that ammunition, well, let's just say karma has a way of coming back around. I sat back, my mind reeling with the possibilities. Could this work? Could I finally make Jake and Amber pay for looking into Carlos's confident eyes? I made my decision. I'm in. Let's do this. He nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Give me a week. I'll be in touch. As he stood to leave, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, of determination. They thought they could break me, but they were wrong. It was time for revenge. The week crawled by, each day an eternity of waiting and wondering. I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into cleaning the house, running errands, anything to distract from the constant churning of my thoughts. What would Carlos find? Would it be enough to bring Jake and Amber to their knees? Maggie checked in on me daily, offering words of encouragement and support. She was the only thing keeping me sane, the only person who truly understood the depth of my pain and anger. Finally, on the 7th day, my phone rang. It was Carlos. Diane, it's me. I've got something. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? My heart leaped into my throat. Of course. I'll be there. I arrived at Carlos's office with 15 minutes to spare, my nerves jangling. Maggie was already there, pacing the small waiting area. She gave me a tight hug when I entered. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, searching my face. I nodded, steeling myself. "As ready as I'll ever be." Carlos emerged from his office, a grim expression on his face. "Come on in, ladies." We settled into the chairs opposite his desk, the air thick with tension. Carlos opened a manila folder, spreading out a series of documents and photographs. "So, I did some digging into Amber's background," he began, tapping the papers. "And let me tell you, this woman is no saint." He slid a document towards me. "First off, she has a criminal record, embezzlement from her previous job. She managed to avoid jail time, but it wasn't pretty." I stared at the paper, a mugshot of Amber staring back at me. She looked younger, but those cold eyes were unmistakable. "But that's not all," Carlos continued, his voice grave. "I also found out that she's a person of interest in the death of her ex-boyfriend." Maggie gasped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. Carlos handed me a newspaper clipping. 2 years ago, her ex was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The police suspected foul play, but they could never prove anything. Amber was the last person to see him alive. I scanned the article, my eyes catching on phrases like suspicious death and ongoing investigation. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile this information with the woman my son had married. "So, what does this mean?" Maggie asked, voicing the question I couldn't. Carlos leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "It means we have leverage. It means that if this information were to come to light, Amber's life as she knows it would be over, her reputation, her marriage, everything." A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. "So, what do we do now?" A slow smile spread across Carlos's face. "Now, we use it. We let Amber know that we have this information and that if she doesn't want it to go public, she needs to convince Jake to make things right with you." Maggie nodded, her eyes gleaming. "And if she refuses?" Carlos shrugged. "Then we go to the police. We let them reopen the investigation into her ex's death. One way or another, Amber will face the consequences of her actions." I sat there stunned, trying to process it all. Could it be this simple? Could. I wanted to make Amber pay for turning Jake against me. Looking at the determination on Maggie and Carlos's faces, I felt a surge of strength. They believed in me, believed that I deserved justice, and for the first time since that awful birthday, I believed it too. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady. "Let's make them pay." Carlos grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Excellent. Give me a day to put everything in motion. By this time tomorrow, Amber won't know what hit her." As we left the office, Maggie squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing, Diane. Don't ever doubt that." I squeezed back, feeling a sense of purpose, of righteous anger. They had picked the wrong woman to mess with. It was time for Amber to learn that lesson the hard way. True to his word, Carlos called me the next day. "It's done," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "I've sent all the information to Amber, along with a little message letting her know that if she doesn't want it to go public, she needs to convince Jake to make amends with you." I felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with nervousness. Do you think it will work? Only one way to find out. But trust me, with the dirt we have on her, she'd be crazy not to comply. I hung up, my mind racing. Would Amber cave? Would she force Jake to apologize and make things right? A part of me dared to hope, even as another part whispered that it was too good to be true. Hours passed with no word. I paced my living room, jumping at every sound, convinced it was the doorbell or the phone. But as evening fell, there was still nothing. Just as I was about to give up and go to bed, there was a pounding at the door. My heart in my throat, I opened it to find Jake standing there, his face a mask of fury. "What the hell did you do?" he snarled, pushing past me into the house. I stumbled back, caught off guard. What are you talking about? He whirled on me, his eyes blazing. Don't play dumb. Amber told me everything about the private investigator, about you digging up her past. What, you thought you could blackmail her into making me forgive you? I stood my ground, lifting my chin. I didn't blackmail anyone. I simply let her know that her actions have consequences, that she can't just destroy my life and get away with it. Jake let out a harsh laugh. Destroy your life? Are you serious right now? You're the one who's trying to destroy our marriage, our family, first with your constant guilt-tripping and manipulation, and now this. Anger surged through me, hot and bright. I'm not the one who turned you against me, Jake. That was all Amber. She's poisoned, can't you see that? She's a criminal, a liar, maybe even a murderer. For a moment, Jake looked stunned. Then his face hardened. You're unbelievable. You think I'm going to believe your crazy accusations over my wife, the mother of my children? They're not accusations, they're facts. Carlos found proof. I don't care what your little detective friend found. Jake roared. Amber is my wife, and I trust her. I love her, and nothing you say or do is going to change that. Tears stung my eyes, blurring my vision. So that's it then? You're choosing her over me, your mother? Jake's jaw clenched. You made that choice for me the moment you decided to pull this stunt. I'm done with you, Mom. Done with your lies, your schemes, all of it. He turned to leave, and panic seized me. I couldn't lose him, not like this. Jake, please. But he was already gone, slamming the door behind him with a finality that shook me to my core. I sank to the floor, racked with sobs tearing from my throat. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The truth was supposed to set me free, to bring Jake back to me. Instead, it had only driven him further away. Through my tears, I heard my phone ringing. It was Carlos. I answered, my voice thick and shaky. Diane, what happened? Did it work? A bitter laugh escaped me. No, it didn't work. Jake is gone. He chose Amber. There was a pause, and then Carlos spoke, his tone determined. Then we move on to Plan B. We go to the police, get them to reopen the investigation into Amber's ex's death. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. What's the point? It won't change anything. Jake's made his choice. This isn't about Jake anymore, Carlos said firmly. This is about justice, about making sure Amber pays for what she's done, one way or another. I closed my eyes, exhaustion and grief washing over me. Could I do it? Could I destroy my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren? But then I remembered the look in Jake's eyes, the venom in his voice, the way Amber had smirked, so smug and self-satisfied. They had brought this on themselves, and now they would face the consequences. Okay, I whispered, a new resolve hardening in my chest. Let's do it. Let's make her pay. The next few days were a blur of activity. Carlos and I gathered all the evidence he had collected, organizing it into a neat package to present to the police. Maggie was a constant presence, offering support and encouragement when my resolve wavered. Finally, the day arrived. We walked into the police station, heads held high, ready to blow the lid off Amber's sordid past. The detective listened intently as we laid out our case, his brow furrowing as he examined the documents and photographs. When we finished, the detective sat back with a grim expression on his face. This is serious stuff, he said, tapping the file. If what you're saying is true, we have grounds to reopen the investigation into Miss Wilson's ex-boyfriend's death. I felt a surge of vindication. It is true, every word of it. The detective nodded. All right then, leave this with me. I'll get the ball rolling. We left the station, a sense of anticipation thrumming through me. It was happening, Amber was finally going to face the music. 2 days later, I received a call from Carlos. Turn on the news, he said, a note of triumph in his voice. I did as he said, my heart pounding as the anchor's face filled the screen. Breaking news, she announced, her expression grave. Local woman Amber Wilson has been arrested in connection with the previously unsolved death of her ex-boyfriend, Mark Thompson. New evidence has come to light, prompting police to reopen the investigation. I watched transfixed as they showed footage of Amber being led out of her and Jake's house in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and anger. Jake followed behind, looking stunned and lost. A fierce satisfaction burned in my chest, she was finally getting what she deserved. But my joy was short-lived. The news report went on to describe how Jake had to use their savings to post Amber's bail and hire a lawyer. It was a financial blow, one that would undoubtedly put a strain on their marriage. I should have felt guilty, knowing that I had played a part in their hardship, but all I could think was that it served them right. They had brought this on themselves with their cruelty and deceit. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as the drama unfolded. Amber's arrest made headlines, and the court of public opinion was merciless. Speculation ran rampant about her involvement in her ex's death, and about what other secrets she might be hiding. Jake put on a brave face, standing by his wife in public, but I could see the toll it was taking. He looked haggard, worn down by the constant scrutiny and whispers. A part of me yearned to reach out, to offer comfort and support, but I hardened my heart, reminding myself of the way he had cast me aside. The vicious words he had hurled at me had stung deeply. He had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. One afternoon, as I was returning from the grocery store, I spotted a familiar figure on my doorstep. It was Jake, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. For a moment, I considered ignoring him, pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want?" I asked coldly as I approached, my arms laden with bags. Jake looked up, his expression a mix of exhaustion and desperation. "Mom, I need your help." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now you need my help? What happened to be done with me and my schemes?" He flinched as if I had struck him. I know. I said some awful things. But this is bigger than that. Amber's in real trouble, Mom. The evidence against her, it's bad." A flicker of unease passed through me. "What are you saying?" Jake's voice broke. "I'm saying I don't know what to do. The lawyer fees alone are bankrupting us, and if Amber goes to prison, I can't raise the kids on my own. I need you, Mom. Please." I stared at him, torn between the urge to comfort and the desire to lash out. He looked so broken, so defeated. But then I remembered the pain he had caused, the way he had abandoned me. I straightened my spine, my voice like ice. "You should have thought of that before you turned your back on me." "I'm sorry, Jake, but you're on your own with that." I brushed past him, ignoring his pleas and apologies. He had made his choice, now he would live with the consequences. A few days after Jake's desperate visit, I received an unexpected call. It was Amber's mother, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "Diane, I know we've had our differences, but I need to ask a favor," she said, the words seeming to pain her. I felt a flicker of surprise. "What kind of favor?" "It's the kids." With everything going on with Amber's case, Jake's struggling to keep up. "He needs a break." "I was hoping you could take the children for the weekend," Amber's mother pressed as if sensing my reluctance. "I know you love those kids. They need some stability right now, and Lord knows they won't get it from Jake or Amber." I sighed, my resolve crumbling. She was right. Whatever issues I had with their parents, my grandchildren were innocent. They deserved better than to be caught in the middle of this mess. "All right," I agreed. "I'll take them for the weekend. But I'm doing this for them, not for Jake or Amber." "Of course. Thank you, Diane. I'll let Jake know to drop them off Friday evening." True to her word, Jake arrived on my doorstep that Friday, the kids in tow. He looked even worse than the last time I'd seen him, his face gaunt and shadowed. "Mom," he greeted me, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for doing this." "I appreciate it," Jake said hoarsely. I nodded stiffly, my attention on the children. They looked up at me, their eyes wide and uncertain. "Grandma," my granddaughter cried, breaking into a smile. She rushed forward, wrapping her little arms around my waist. I hugged her back, blinking back sudden tears. "Hello, sweetheart. I've missed you." My grandson was more reserved, hovering by Jake's side. I knelt, opening my arms. "Come here, buddy. It's okay." Slowly, he stepped into my embrace, his small body trembling. My heart ached for him, for both of them. Jake cleared his throat. "I'll pick them up Sunday evening. If anything comes up, just give me a call." I straightened, meeting his gaze coolly. "We'll be fine. Enjoy your weekend." With a final nod, he left, leaving me alone with the kids. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Who wants pizza for dinner? The weekend passed in a blur of laughter, games, and stories. For a little while, I was able to forget the drama and heartache, lost in the simple joy of being with my grandchildren. But all too soon, it was over. Jake arrived to collect the kids, his expression guarded, as they gathered their things. "Grandma, can we come stay with you again soon?" "We had so much fun," my granddaughter asked, tugging on my hand. I smiled, smoothing her hair. "Of course, honey. Anytime you want." Jake's jaw tightened. "We should get going. Say goodbye, kids." They hugged me tightly, their little faces sad. I watched as they climbed into Jake's car, my heart heavy as he prepared to leave. Jake paused, turning back to me. "Listen, Mom, about what they said. I don't want you to get any ideas. This was a one-time thing." I bristled, anger sparking. "Excuse me? Do you think I'm trying to turn them against you?" "Wouldn't be the first time," he muttered. I saw red. "How dare you? I have done nothing but love and support those children, which is more than I can say for you and Amber. You're so wrapped up in your drama, you can't even see how much they're hurting." Jake's face flushed. "You have no idea what we're going through. No idea the stress, the pressure. And whose fault is that?" I cut him off. "You chose this, Jake. You chose Amber and all the chaos that comes with her. Don't you dare put that on me." He stared at me, his eyes hard. "This isn't over, Mom. I won't let you poison my kids against me." With that, he got in the car and drove away, leaving me shaking with rage and hurt. I stood there watching until the car disappeared from view, a cold determination settling over me. If Jake wanted to play hardball, then so be it. I was done playing nice. It was time to end this once and for all. The day of Amber's trial arrived cold and gray. I dressed with care, choosing a somber black suit that radiated quiet authority. Maggie picked me up, her face set with grim determination. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as we drove to the courthouse. I nodded, my jaw tight. I've been ready for a long time. We met Carlos on the steps, his expression serious. "I've got a surprise for you," he said, leading us inside. I tracked down Mark Thompson's family. "They're here to testify," Carlos announced, his voice filled with determination. I felt a surge of gratitude and vindication. With their testimony, Amber's fate would be sealed. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table, my heart pounding, as Amber was led in, her wrists and ankles shackled. She looked pale and drawn, but her eyes still glittered with malice when they met mine. Jake sat stiffly beside her, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I looked away, focusing on the judge as he called the court to order. The trial was a grueling, emotional affair. The prosecutor laid out the evidence against Amber in damning detail, painting a picture of a cruel, calculating woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. But it was the testimony of Mark Thompson's family that truly sealed her fate. His mother, a frail silver-haired woman, spoke of her son's kind heart, his bright future cut short. His sister wept as she recounted Amber's controlling, abusive behavior, and how she had isolated Mark from his loved ones. Through it all, Amber sat stone-faced, her eyes cold and empty. Jake grew more and more agitated, his knee bouncing, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, it was time for the verdict. The jury filed back in, their faces somber. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. In the matter of the state versus Amber Wilson, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Amber's face drained of color, her mouth falling open in shock. Jake leaped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "No," he shouted, his voice raw with anguish. "No, this is wrong. She's innocent." The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "Mr. Wilson, control yourself, or I will have you removed from this courtroom," the judge warned sternly. Jake subsided, collapsing back into his seat, his head in his hands. Amber turned to him, her expression desperate. "Jake, do something. You can't let them do this to me," she pleaded. But Jake wouldn't look at her, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The bailiff stepped forward, preparing to lead Amber away. I watched, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me, triumph, yes, but also a hollow sort of sadness. It had come to this, my son was broken and humiliated, his life in ruins. As Amber was escorted out, she turned back, her eyes locking with mine. At that moment, I saw the depth of her hatred, the venom in her soul. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low and deadly. "I'll make you pay for this, you, ___." "I swear it." I met her gaze steadily, unflinching. "You've already paid, Amber. You made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences. Goodbye." With that, I turned and walked out, my head held high. It was over. Justice had been served. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake the lingering unease. Jake's anguished face haunted me, the devastation in his eyes. Had I gone too far? Had my quest for vengeance blinded me to the collateral damage? I shook my head, pushing the doubts aside. No. Jake had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. He had chosen Amber, chosen to turn his back on me. Now he would have to live with the fallout. I stepped out into the cold, gray day, drawing my coat tighter around me. It was time to move on, to build a new life for myself, a life without Jake, without Amber's toxic influence, a life of my own making. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel.